Chapter 577. In the future, if something really does happen to the capital, what will you do? Su Yurong walked to the window and crossed her arms over her chest. As she gazed at the specks of stars in the lake, her voice became as light as water. Chun Chongsheng replied, I cultivate the Tao of following my heart. If the matter comes, my heart will naturally move. Su Yurong did not turn her head. After a moment of silence, she asked, If the one who comes is me? Chun Chongsheng very seriously thought this over, but he realized that he could not imagine such a scene, no matter what conclusion he came to. He replied, I don't know. The Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets had constructed these 10-some small buildings by the lakeshore with great care, especially the one Chun Chongsheng lived in. Opening the window, one could see the lake, and there was a wooden plank outside the window. If one walked down this plank, one could walk into the shallow waters by the lakeshore. Under the starlight, several black fish were swimming in the shallow waters. Su Yurong walked down the plank, took off her shoes and socks on the lowest wooden platform, and walked into the clear and shallow waters. Those black fish were not afraid of people at all. Not only did they not flee in fright, they even surrounded her, slowly swimming around her bare, snow-white feet. It was a very beautiful sight. Chun Chongsheng gazed at her standing in the lake and felt that her back was rather lonely, and then he became somewhat confused. Logically speaking, she was the holy maiden of the south, so neither the elder of heavenly secrets nor Mao Qiyu should have concealed this matter from her. But why was it that even tonight she still could not confirm that the middle-aged scholar was the demon lord? The previous conversation had diluted many of her emotions. He did not wish to continue developing like this, so he asked his question. When the demon lord broke out of Mount Han's Heavenstone array, the elder of heavenly secrets was heavily injured and had not yet recovered, so I did not see him. And Principal Mao? He's the Pope's arm, so how could he possibly give me too much convenience? In the end, it was still a problem of alignment. Chun Chongsheng thought, as the representative of the Orthodoxy's new faction, Ling Haijiwang has assuredly long ago defected to the Divine Empress, so why didn't he tell you? He did not ask this question, but Su Yurong knew what he was thinking. She extended her hand into the lake to play with those small fish, casually saying, He and Tian Haichimu asked Xiao to deal with you. I was unhappy, so I ignored him. Hearing that she was unhappy because of this matter, Chun Chongsheng was very happy. He also walked down the wooden walkway outside the window, arriving at the shallow waters of the lake. The cool lake water undulated slowly, and the soft silver sand was very comfortable to step on. The Taoist scriptures say that the heaven lake is formed by the gathering of hot springs. Why is this water so cold? The water in the center of the lake is much hotter. I heard that the water from the two hottest springs can cook an egg. It sounds interesting. Do you want to find a chance to give it a try? Just because you can cook eggs? Yes, it's very convenient. Do you know how to cook? Yes, didn't you eat in the Garden of Zhou? Then I'll learn how to cook. The cafeteria of the Tradition Academy is not bad. The chef of Clear Lake Restaurant naturally has extraordinary skills, but I can't always go from South Stream Temple to the capital to eat every day. Did the white crane come this time? Do you want to ask it what it thinks? The white crane is always like you. If it knows that you have such thoughts, it will definitely change its mind. I'm just saying, you're just saying, I'm serious. He and she stood side by side in the lake under the small building, gazing at the numerous stars in the night sky. They casually chatted, and then gradually their voices fell silent. They were quiet for a very long time, neither of them speaking. Unlike the silence in the room before, this silence was beautiful, because his shoulder was gently leaning against hers. Sometimes, when they parted slightly, they would immediately lean back against each other. It was hard to say who would go and who would have to go. After some time, probably because they were tired from standing, the two sat down on the lowest wooden platform. Su Yurong took out a small cloth bag from her sleeve and took something out of it. Chun Chongsheng did not notice. He pointed at a pitch-black stone in the lake and asked, Is that the Heaven Stone? Su Yurong's voice was somewhat unclear. Yes. Chun Chongsheng turned to her and asked, How did you comprehend those stones? They also had stones, and they were much more important than the heaven stones in Mount Han, because those stones were heavenly tome monoliths. He had not come to the boiling stone summit to comprehend the heaven stones to advance, but to see her. But who could have expected that after a peaceful and uneventful journey of 10,000 li, upon entering Mount Han, they would encounter such a major event? There's been no progress at the moment. Let's take it slowly. Su Yurong slightly leaned back, her hands propping up the wooden platform. Her bare feet lightly patted the surface of the lake, making her seem very cute. I was a little anxious after meeting the Demon Lord. When he thought of the bloody sight he had seen on the mountain path, Chen Changsheng felt a tinge of fear in his heart. Su Yurong understood what he was feeling and said, "Meeting such a peerless expert and being able to survive will always have its benefits." Chen Changsheng grunted, then said, "It's just that I didn't expect the Demon Lord to be so terrifying. The difference is too great." Back in Xuanyang City, Zhu Luo's attacks had basically all been blocked by Wang Pe. But this time, when confronting the Demon Lord in Mount Han, Lu Qing and Xiao De were practically powerless to resist. Su Yurong replied, "The Demon Lord is naturally much stronger than Zhu Luo, but there's another important point. Wang Pe is also much stronger than Lu Qing and Xiao De." Chen Changsheng was confused, thinking Lu Qing is a peak star condensation assassin and Xiao De is an expert in the top 5 of the Proclamation of Liberation. Although Wang Pe is at the top of the Proclamation of Liberation, how can he be said to be much stronger? Wang Pe is an extraordinary person. He can't be understood using common sense, Su Yurong seriously said. Chen Changsheng could not rationally accept that Wang Pe was stronger than Lu Qing and Xiao De working together, but he was very willing to accept it emotionally. Besides the Demon Lord, what other formidable people are there on the side of the demons? I hear that the demon commander is very strong, and then there are those demon generals. You should have seen them on the snowy plains. Chen Changsheng recalled that distant mountainous shadow he had seen on the snowy plains of the land of demons and subconsciously shook his head. With his current level of strength, he was still far from being able to fight against these powerful foes. Without leaving the capital, it's truly very difficult to discover that there are so many formidable people in the world. You're also very formidable. At the very least, when the Demon Lord was your age, he definitely couldn't beat you. I feel that these words can also be used to describe you. That's exactly what I meant. What's wrong? It's nothing. Chen Changsheng really wanted to say, "Your voice is very pleasant to listen to, sweet and sticky, like you're holding a candied date in your mouth." Note 1. With a squelch, Su Yurong spat something into the lake. This thing slowly sank into the water, attracting the little black fish to peck at it. The lake water was very clear. Chen Changsheng carefully looked at it and realized that what she had spat out was a date pit. The little black fish realized that it was not food and swam away in boredom. Su Yurong found this very amusing. Crossing her feet, she happily laughed. Chen Changsheng couldn't help but scratch his head at this sight. Only then did Su Yurong come to her senses. This was not the deserted and serene peak, nor was it the mahjong table in a small village. Sitting at her side was a young man. Her face somewhat hot, she subconsciously took out a silk pouch filled with snacks from her sleeve and offered it to him, softly asking, "Do you want to eat?" There was no date pit in her mouth, but her voice was still sticky because she was somewhat embarrassed. She lowered her head, not even looking at Chen Changsheng. Chen Changsheng looked at her long eyelashes, her white and tender skin, and her rosy lips. For a moment, he was somewhat dumbfounded. He thought to himself, "Why can I only think of such tedious adjectives?" Note 2. He took the silk pouch from her hand and took out a snack. Without even looking at what it was, he tossed it into his mouth. "What's wrong?" Su Yurong raised her head and glanced at him. Chen Changsheng was a very honest person. He looked at her seriously and said, "You're really pretty." Su Yurong was slightly embarrassed and lowered her head. After a while, she raised her head again and asked, "Am I pretty now? Or am I pretty in the Garden of Zhou?" Just like all young girls, even if she was the holy maiden, at this sort of moment, she would always ask a few stupid questions. Of course, the stupidity here referred to her asking this question But it did not mean that the question itself was very easy to answer. When Su Yurong entered the garden of Zhou, she had used the identity of a disciple of the 13 divisions of Radiant Green. She had disguised herself, so her appearance was only ordinary. The current her was publicly acknowledged as the most beautiful girl in the world. But if Chun Changsheng were to very honestly say that the current her was even prettier, then he would definitely be wrong. In reality, this was just like the eternal problem of the fallen river. It was very difficult to answer, and it concealed even more complicated trials and dangers. This problem simply did not have a correct answer. Whether or not Qin Changsheng's answer satisfied her completely depended on her current mood. Qin Changsheng was not skilled at lying. What was amazing was that he had once very seriously pondered this problem and had long since reached a conclusion. They're all very pretty, but different kinds of pretty. He looked at Su Yurong and said very seriously. These were his words from the bottom of his heart, the truth. Su Yurong was very happy to hear this. He saw that she was happy, and was also very happy. If they could always sit like this, with a lake in front of them, a mountain behind them, and a brilliant starry sky above them. You're right by my side. But can we always be together? A layer of cloud floated over from some unknown place, obscuring a certain star region in the southern sky and casting a shadow over the lake. A shadow also appeared in Chun Changsheng's heart. There's something I've been hiding from you. You said it before. Did I? Yes. I forgot. Do you want to know? Everyone should have their own secrets. I also have mine, and I don't want you to know my secret, so... Oh, I suddenly realized that I really want to tell you that secret. Just because you want to know my secret? Yes. Qin Changsheng, you're not a common woman. Why are you so interested in peeking into other people's secrets? Maybe it's because I cultivate to follow my heart? A man and a woman passionately in love, even if they repeated the same words 300 times, they would not feel bored. Because for them, the words themselves were not important. The important thing was to talk to the other person. However, for those listeners, to listen to the same words so many times was indeed an extremely difficult thing to bear. The sweeter the words, the more difficult it was. Tang 36 felt very uncomfortable at this moment. He felt that he ate too much tonight and wanted to vomit. There was only one path on the side of the small building against the mountain. At this moment, he was sitting cross-legged there with the one shui sword across his knees and a wild grass in his mouth. His face was full of grief and indignation. He thought to himself, what a pair of adulterers. Note 1. I forgot which novel I read this description in. I think it's very good, but I forgot where it came from. Note 2. Boring description. This is mainly talking about me. Note 3. I don't know if Tang 36 will feel bored or not. I'm really worried that everyone will feel bored, but I really like to write romance. The small building with white sand is obviously Maldives. Of course, the date is referring to the honeymoon. Let's be sweet. See everyone tomorrow. Chapter 578. When he woke up the next morning, Tang 36 went to find Chun Changsheng with 2 dark circles under his eyes. What happened to you? Qin Changsheng was very concerned about his health. Tang 36 was very tired and said, being a lookout is very tiring. Can you guys sleep earlier in the future? Qin Changsheng heard this and felt a little embarrassed and guilty. Just a few days. A few days? Tang 36 raised his voice and shouted angrily. When we were in the capital, you also said a few days. Now it's still a few days. Then tell me, how many days is a few days? How many days is it? How long are you going to hide this? Qin Changsheng was speechless. Tang 36 looked at him and said bitterly, I beg you, hurry up and tell the world. It's too hard to keep a secret. Qin Changsheng comforted him. I also feel the same way, but hearing the words feel the same way, Tang 36 suddenly became angry and shouted, what? Feel the same way? Feel your mother's feeling. Feel your mother's feeling. This is your own business. It's none of my business. You get all the benefits. The snow of the Tradition Academy, the wind on the top of the cold mountain. You let me take it. If you can, then give me that date. Qin Changsheng was originally ashamed of what he said, but when he heard the word date, he immediately became alert. He stared at him and said, "What did you say?" Tang 36 just realized that he let slip, but he didn't want to admit defeat. "What? Can't I get some benefits for being a lookout?" Chun Changsheng was helpless and said, "Didn't we agree before? Don't listen to indecent things. Don't look at indecent things." Tang 36 pretended to be shocked and said, "You molested her?" At this moment, Zhishio walked in and looked at the two people who were at each other's throats. He asked, "You want to fight?" "Nope." Tang 36 used a ladder to get down and said, "I asked him to help me find out where my idol went, but he just wouldn't let me know." The idol he was talking about was Lu Qing. With the departure of Su Li and the mysterious her, the former third assassin in the world should be ranked first on the ranking of assassins. But even if the chief assassin was still an assassin, the top assassin was still an assassin, and the top assassin was still an assassin. Just as Zhishio had said, an assassin participating in the Boiling Stone Summit was seeking death. Chun Changsheng had once asked the steward of the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets to look after him. Not long after that steward agreed, he was turned into a pile of blood pearls by the Demon Lord. When they thought about how Lu Qing had been heavily injured by the Demon Lord and how special his status was, the three of them couldn't help but worry. On an island in the Heaven Lake, a hot mist pervaded the surroundings of the garden, not dispersing all year round. Living here wasn't necessarily comfortable, but it was very helpful for healing injuries, especially after being injured by the extremely cold demonic technique. This place could allow one to recover the fastest. Lu Qing was currently recuperating on the island. He did not need Chun Changsheng and the other two to worry, nor did he need them to beg the Pavilion of Divination to let him go. The assassin list was issued by the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets. Very few people noticed the hidden meaning behind this fact. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets sat across from Lu Qing and asked, "With Su Li gone, what do you plan to do next?" Lu Qing was not a member of the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets, but he had done many things for the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets. In truth, even Su Li had done many things for the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets. Lu Qing thought it over, then said, "If Sir does not object, I want to go to the capital." "To do what in the capital?" "To kill Tianhai." "Then I object." The Elder of Heavenly Secrets calmly said to him, "The Empress is my good friend, and I don't want you to throw away your life." Lu Qing replied, "Then let's talk about it later." The Elder of Heavenly Secrets suddenly asked, "Chun Changsheng, just what sort of person is he?" Lu Qing very seriously pondered this question for a very long time, finally saying, "He is a good person." The Elder of Heavenly Secrets slightly arched his brows, rather surprised by this answer. Whether it was Su Li, Lu Qing, or he, none of them were good people. What they loathed the most, or rather, disdained the so-called good people. But when Lu Qing said that Chun Changsheng was a good person, he did not see any ridicule on Lu Qing's face, only seriousness and respect. This answer was very important to the Elder of Heavenly Secrets. "Since he is a little fellow who has good intentions towards the world, then I will represent this world in returning his good intentions." When did Sir ever have such a thing as good intentions? When a person is about to die, his words are good. So what are his intentions? The light boat floated on the surface of the lake, breaking through the mist as if it was traversing a fairyland. Chun Changsheng could clearly sense that there were defensive arrays in the mist and in the water. As he passed the small island in the middle of the lake, he could see the disciples of the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets bowing. It didn't take long before he arrived at the island in the middle of the lake. It was also the warmest, perhaps even the hottest, place in this frigid mountain range. As he walked through the mist and stepped on the somewhat slippery stone slabs, a few questions surged in his mind. Why was the Elder of Heavenly Secrets in such a rush to see him? Putting aside the fact that he had just woken up from his coma, the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had probably also suffered significant injuries. As he thought of these things, he gradually forgot about the stifling heat around him. When he arrived in the garden and saw the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, he finally understood something. Although he still did not have an answer, he already had a clue. Last summer, in the Orthodox Academy, The Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets had sent an old steward to inspect the stainless sword. It turned out that the old steward was the Elder of Heavenly Secrets himself. This meant that the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had naturally not gone to inspect the sword, but to inspect the person, to inspect Chen Changsheng. The steward responsible for leading the way from the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets respectfully led Chen Changsheng to his seat and then silently withdrew. Chen Changsheng calmly sat, like a junior listening attentively to a lecture. If this were 2 years ago, he would have found it impossible to remain so calm upon meeting an important figure like the Elder of Heavenly Secrets. But now, he had already seen far too many legendary figures, even legends like the Demon Lord and Wang Jitsa. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets noticed that even though he had just passed through the stifling heat of the mist, Chen Changsheng's collar was still tightly buttoned, and his clothes were meticulous. He was very satisfied with this. I've seen countless heroes, and you are not inferior to any one of them. Without any pleasantries or probing, the most senior figure on the continent began his conversation. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets looked at Chen Changsheng and said, I've also seen countless mountains, but my favorite has always been that Mount Langya on the shore of the Eastern Sea. And that mountain was the reward the Divine Empress gave me when I went to the capital to see you. Only now did Chen Changsheng realize that there were some transactions hidden behind this matter, and he was very shocked. The entire world knew that the Elder of Heavenly Secrets possessed an unimaginably supreme intelligence and a world-shaking ability to calculate and calculate. In the view of many people, if there really was a person that could see through fate, then that person had to be the Elder of Heavenly Secrets. The Divine Empress had asked the Elder of Heavenly Secrets to take a look at him and had gifted him a famed mountain. This price could not be considered small. He naturally wanted to know just what secrets the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had seen on his body. But even if he was the future Pope, he was still a junior in front of the Elder of Heavenly Secrets. The tempo of the conversation was not under his control. He had many things he wanted to ask the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, and the Elder of Heavenly Secrets also had many questions he wanted to ask him. Since the Demon Lord did not leave at the start, why did he leave later on? The Elder of Heavenly Secrets asked. After Chen Changsheng woke up, Tang 36 and Zhishou were also most concerned about this question, because his survival was an extremely inconceivable matter. Even if the Elder of Heavenly Secrets could calculate everything in the world, he still could not calculate just how he had survived. This was because he could not calculate that Wang Jitsa was still alive, and that at that moment, Wang Jitsa had appeared in Mount Han, in front of that precipice. Chen Changsheng had promised the old man that he would not speak of this matter. Tang 36 and Zhishou were unexpected, but Su Yurong was an exception. Although the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had an exalted status and extremely high seniority, this was not an accident, nor was it an exception. As a result, he said nothing, only shook his head. This was a very direct attitude. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets did not get angry, only calmly gazed at him, a pensive expression on his face. His eyes were calm and brimming with insight, as if they could see through all secrets. You don't want to tell me how you survived. So can you tell me why the Demon Lord came to kill you? Chen Changsheng thought to himself, the Demon Lord did not come to kill me. And then he once more shook his head. This was still a very direct attitude. He did not want to discuss this matter, because it involved his greatest secret and fear. Perhaps you do not know what happened afterwards. When the Demon Lord returned to Xiulao City, he was already heavily injured. At this point, the Elder of Heavenly Secrets paused, as if giving him some time to accept and digest his shock. Chen Changsheng was truly shocked. The Demon Lord was heavily injured, and after he broke through the Heavenstone array of Mount Han, just what sort of situation did he encounter? He encountered His Majesty the White Emperor. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets did not give him too much time to guess, straightforwardly saying, or to put it more accurately, His Majesty the White Emperor was waiting for him in the snowy plains. Hearing this, Chen Changsheng's heart gradually sank. Even in the garden at the center of the island that was as warm as spring, he still felt a sliver of cold. It seems that the demon lord leaving Shualao City and coming to Mount Han to kill you is already calculated by someone. He fell into the trap. The elder of heavenly secrets calmly gazed into his eyes. Only, I did not know of this trap, nor did the Empress. Then did you know? Chen Changxing's mind was somewhat absent-minded. Hearing these words, he subconsciously shook his head. This was the third time he had shaken his head since the conversation began, but it was completely different from the previous 2 times. He was somewhat perplexed, somewhat uneasy, somewhat unwilling to continue thinking about it. Yet the elder of heavenly secrets continued to stare into his eyes, his voice still continuing. Since this was a trap, the person who said it should have been well aware that you have something on your body that the demon lord had to obtain, even if it meant taking enormous risks. Just what do you have on your body? How many people in the world know of this matter? You can choose not to answer, but I recommend that you carefully think about it for yourself. Chen Changsheng lowered his head, remaining silent for a very long time. Embarking on a long and arduous journey of 3,000 kilometers. Yes, I have to detour to the west to pay my respects to my father-in-law. How cool. I will balance the journey with work and rest. If I don't have the strength to write, I will not hesitate to ask everyone for leave. Relax. Chapter 579. Only a few people know the secret of his blood. In the Garden of Zhou, the demon general couple and the shaman elder had both died. Monsters could not communicate with humans, and after Nang told her father, she would definitely keep the secret. Yurong obviously would not tell anyone else, so that left only her master and Senior Yurin. Last night, Su Yurong had already reminded him, but he didn't want to or didn't dare to think about it, so he didn't answer her. But regardless of whether it was him or Su Yurong, they were both very clear that the question still existed. It was not something that could be ignored just because they did not answer it. Today, the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had directly torn apart the paper window, forcing him to face this question and obtain his own answer. If this really was a plot to assassinate the Demon Lord, was it really arranged by Teacher and Senior Yurin? Chun Changsheng suddenly raised his head, looked at the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, and asked, "What was the final result?" The Elder of Heavenly Secrets slightly raised his eyebrows. He had not expected that this youth would be able to calm down in such a short amount of time. As I said, when the Demon Lord returned to Shualao City, he was heavily injured. I mean both sides. His Majesty the White Emperor has also suffered significant injuries and will need several years to recuperate, but the Demon Lord's injuries are even more severe. Based on what I know, in Shualao City, the Demon Commander and Black Robe have always been at odds with each other like fire and water, but they were forcefully suppressed by the Demon Lord. Now that the Demon Lord is heavily injured, doesn't this mean that his control over the entire demon domain, especially over those two, has weakened? You could say that. Whether it's the Divine Empress, His Holiness the Pope, or Senior, what they're most worried about is the demons disrupting the confluence of the North and South, right? Not bad. If the interior is unstable, it'll be very difficult for the demons to divert their attention to destroy the confluence of the North and South. That makes sense. The human race and the demon race will have precious time to regroup, and the situation of the entire continent will be in our favor. Yes. After this conversation, the garden became quiet again. After a long time, Chen Changsheng said, "That's enough." The Elder of Heavenly Secrets slightly raised his brows, asking, "Enough? Yes, I might have been bait and almost died, but if I can get so many benefits, then it's enough." Chen Changsheng looked at the Elder of Heavenly Secrets and said seriously. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets looked into his eyes and saw no hypocrisy, no reluctance, only sincerity. Even if you're being used? Yes, even if I'm being used. Don't tell me you don't feel angry because of this? The Elder of Heavenly Secrets asked. Chen Changsheng thought for a while and said, "Yes, I am very angry or sad. I will find a chance to ask him face to face." The Elder of Heavenly Secrets understood his meaning and knew that he would not reveal the name of the one who set this trap. He said, "Every person has their own choice. I only hope that you will not regret it. Chun Chang Sheng said, Actually, I still don't understand why you always want me to make a choice. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets thrust his hand into the fog and, like a magic trick, produced a basket of peaches. The peaches were plump, pink, and tender, looking extremely tempting. He took out a peach from the basket and handed it to Chun Chang Sheng, along with a small knife. Chun Chang Sheng very naturally took the knife and began to carefully peel the skin. Peeling the peach made no sound, and the garden was very quiet. After a short while, he had finished peeling a peach and politely offered it to the Elder of Heavenly Secrets. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets shook his head and indifferently said, To eat a peach, to peel or not to peel, this is a choice. Chun Chang Sheng's hand holding the peach froze in midair. If I were eating a peach myself, I wouldn't peel it because the skin is nutritious, but I was thinking of eating it. Old people have difficulty digesting, so peeling is more suitable. This was his explanation. To the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, this was meaningless. No matter who it is directed at, no matter what the final choice is, in the end, you have made a choice. So, sweet or salty, peeling or not peeling, survival or death, these have always been questions. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets looked into his eyes and calmly said, Life is made up of countless multiple-choice questions. Who can completely avoid them? Chun Chang Sheng asked, If no matter what choice we make, it is not in accordance with our hearts, then what should we do? At the time when the Demon Lord blocked your path on the mountain path, as the Master of Mount Han, I could have made two different responses, but whether it was activating the Heavenstone Array and simultaneously trapping him and all of you in Mount Han, forcing you into desperate straits, or ignoring the Demon Lord and saving you first, to me, neither was a perfect solution. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets continued, When I made my final choice, I still relied on my own heart. Chun Chang Sheng asked, Not in accordance with your heart, but in the end, you still acted according to your heart. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets replied, When the vault of the heavens shatters and the stars fall, it is simply impossible for you to make a rational judgment. You can only act according to your heart at that moment. That is your true heart. Chun Chang Sheng fell silent for a very long time, then said, I understand. Every person will face their own multiple-choice question and give their own answer. My choice to activate the Heavenstone Array and have you, Tang Tang, and the others die together with the Demon Lord was my heart. Although this is unfair to you all, I do not feel ashamed, and I believe that no one will blame me, because the Demon Lord's life is more important than all of you combined. I don't have too many complaints about this. Even to the one who set this trap, I just feel that they should have told me beforehand, or perhaps this would have made me feel better, not like I was purely being used. Every person can only take responsibility for their own choices. I do not care about what the one who set this trap was thinking, but for you, I want to make some compensation. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets calmly said to him, I advise you to grasp this opportunity. Hearing these words, Chun Chang Sheng was somewhat shocked and also somewhat perplexed. With the Elder of Heavenly Secrets' status in the continent, these words of his were an enormous temptation to any cultivator. Whether it was gold, silver, treasures, secret cultivation manuals, divine weapons, or even famous mountains and great rivers, the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets could produce them all. However, Chun Chang Sheng did not lack for these things. He had the Having Blade style, the secrets of the Mount Lee sword style, his status as successor to the Pope, the Heavenly Tome monoliths, and Tang 36. What could the Elder of Heavenly Secrets give him? Or perhaps, what was the most extraordinary aspect of the Elder of Heavenly Secrets? It was his wisdom, his experience, his understanding of the world, and his countless secrets that were unknown to others. I would like to ask Sir a few questions. Chun Chang Sheng made up his mind and looked at the Elder of Heavenly Secrets. This answer was clearly within the expectations of the Elder of Heavenly Secrets. He faintly smiled, the wrinkles on his face deepening. Who am I? This was Chun Chang Sheng's first question. This was also the third to last question of the essay on the origin of the Tao. This was the answer that countless experts and masters, after cultivating to the peak, had sought in a daze. This was one of the most famous questions in the 10 debates between the Pope and the grand scholar of the demon race, Tungus. This was a metaphysical question, a philosophical question. This question had already entered the domain of the Tao. But the Elder of Heavenly Secrets understood that Chen Chongqing's question was not so particular. It was very direct, very simple. You just want to know, just who am I? Chapter 580. Who was Chen Chongqing? He was Jiang Luer that Taoist Ji had picked up from the stream. He was a young Taoist from Xining who was engaged to the heavenly phoenix, Su Yurong. He was the successor to the orthodoxy, the successor to the Pope. He was well-versed in the Taoist canon, had outstanding talent, and was a genius of the sword. But just who was he? He looked into the eyes of the Elder of Heavenly Secrets and very seriously asked, "Am I Crown Prince Xiaoming?" This was one of the most sensational and most secretive rumors in the capital in the past year. No one knew the answer. Everyone said that the Elder of Heavenly Secrets was omniscient. So did he know? This question was simple and direct, abnormally stern, just like Su Li's sword or Wang Po's blade. Even though the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had mentally prepared himself for this, he still narrowed his eyes and fell silent for a very long time. After some time, he finally spoke. "The Empress had me make a special trip to the capital to see you." In truth, she also wanted to ask the same question. Chen Chongqing thought to himself that this was also the question he wanted to know the most. The result. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets replied, "There was no result because your and Crown Prince Xiaoming's ages do not match." Chen Chongqing did not relax because of this answer, for two reasons. He had carefully calculated. Although his and Crown Prince Xiaoming's ages did not match, Senior Yuren just so happened to match. Moreover, the Elder of Heavenly Secrets' words contained a deeper meaning. Because their ages did not match, there was no result. Did this mean that as long as their ages matched, in every aspect, he should be Crown Prince Xiaoming? If you really did match Crown Prince Xiaoming's age, then this matter would instead be wrong. Why? Because it was too correct. Because it was too correct, it was wrong. This sounded rather mysterious, but Chen Chongqing easily understood. If his age matched up with Crown Prince Xiaoming's, then the rumors in the capital could very easily come true. Those storms hidden in the shadows were bound to burst open, perhaps tearing apart the black curtain of the capital, or perhaps blowing him to smithereens. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets' next words startled Chen Chongqing out of his reverie, and his body went somewhat stiff. "I know that you have a senior brother. His age matches Crown Prince Xiaoming's." The Elder of Heavenly Secrets looked into his eyes and said, "There's no need to be nervous. I'm not saying that he's Crown Prince Xiaoming." Chen Chongqing asked why. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets replied, "Because he and Crown Prince Xiaoming are completely compatible." Chen Chongqing didn't know what to say. "I've always admired Dean Shang's myriad of Taoist techniques." With a calm expression, the Elder of Heavenly Secrets said, "When the false becomes the true becomes the false. Alas, it cannot deceive me." Chen Chongqing didn't ask why he couldn't hide it from him. At this moment, his mind was completely elsewhere. He recalled the Taoist scripture called the Scripture of Time. Time was age. Could it be that besides age, I can match Crown Prince Xiaoming in every other aspect? Yes, I'm very sure that you're the descendant of the Chan imperial family. Hearing this, Chen Chongqing could no longer remain calm. In the rumors that had been circulating in the capital for many years, before saying that he was Crown Prince Xiaoming, they would naturally first mention that he was a member of the imperial clan. Why? Why is everyone so sure that I'm royalty? Is it because my surname is Chun? He asked the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, not realizing that his voice was rather high compared to normal. This sort of agitated state of mind was a very rare occurrence for him. The garden was shrouded in a thick fog, tightly isolating his conversation with the Elder of Heavenly Secrets. No one would be able to hear it. "How can I be sure that you're royalty?" The Elder of Heavenly Secrets looked at him, the emotions in his eyes rather complex. "Because your body once had a sun wheel. Sun wheel. Chun Changsheng was not unfamiliar with this term, though ever since the Tian High Divine Empress reigned and all the members of the imperial clan were sent out of the capital, very few people would mention this term. When the Chun imperial clan emerged from Tianliang County and pacified the world, they successively produced peerless experts like Chun Xuanba and Emperor Taizong precisely because the talent of the Chun clan's bloodline had always been different. Their cultivation was different from that of other sects and sects, and the specific differences were naturally the greatest secret of the imperial clan, but the two-word sun wheel had still been passed down. Chun Changsheng thought back to his cultivation process from Xining to the capital, especially his countless times of meditative introspection. He shook his head. No, I didn't discover any sun wheel in my body. That's because the sun wheel in your body was destroyed a long time ago. To put it more accurately, it exploded. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets calmly gazed at him. Perhaps he was mistaken, but Chun Changsheng felt that the other's eyes carried a hint of pity. How is this possible? If it really is, as Sir says, that my body once had a sun wheel and then exploded, why did I not feel anything? That's because when the sun wheel in your body was destroyed, you were still an infant. But even so, why has no one ever discovered the traces of a sun wheel in my body? Why did Sir not discover it when you went to see me in the capital last time? Chun Changsheng still found it impossible to accept this reasoning, even if the speaker was the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, because at the time, your cultivation level was not high enough. As your cultivation gradually deepened and starlight entered your body, the image of your meridians became even clearer, allowing me to finally confirm it. Weren't we talking about the explosion of the sun wheel? Why did you mention meridians? Did your meridians rupture, and you always had problems with the circulation of true essence? The Elder of Heavenly Secrets looked into his eyes and asked. Chun Changsheng was shocked speechless. Just like blood, the blocked or ruptured meridians were also the greatest secret of his body. This secret was even more terrifying because, according to his master, the problem with his meridians would cause him to die at the age of 20. He had not expected that this secret would be so easily seen through by the Elder of Heavenly Secrets and then spoken of. But what did ruptured meridians have to do with him being of the Imperial clan? What did it have to do with the sun wheel? The Elder of Heavenly Secrets raised his right hand and pointed across the table at a certain place on Chun Changsheng's chest. When you were an infant, the sun wheel exploded here and then spread out like a spider's web, severing your 9 meridians. You want to ask what the connection is between the ruptured meridians and the explosion of the sun wheel. Your ruptured meridians are the traces of the explosion of the sun wheel, the most direct evidence. Of the countless people in the world, only you have these signs of ruptured meridians. So you are of the Chun Imperial clan. Of course, you are an extremely unfortunate member of the Imperial clan. Logically speaking, the moment the sun wheel exploded, the infant you should have already died. But you survived. This in itself is already a kind of miracle. The garden fell into silence. The fog became abnormally dense. The garden that had been as warm as spring suddenly became as cold as the harsh winter. Chun Changsheng said nothing for a very long time. Only after a very long time did he look at the Elder of Heavenly Secrets and ask, "But I will still die, right?" This time, it was the Elder of Heavenly Secrets who was silent. Chapter 581. The thousands of strands of wind on the surface of the lake somehow managed to pass through the formation and reach the field. It scattered the fog and lowered the temperature. That was how the two of them felt. My medical skills are not as good as Shang's or Yin's. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets looked at him and said, "If the two of them don't have any ideas, I also don't know what to do." Chun Changsheng gazed into the distance. On the other side of the mist that had been blown away, he could faintly see the dark blue lake. It was very beautiful. However, according to my speculation, since your problem lies in the blockage of your meridians caused by the explosion of your sun chakra, when you were a baby, if you don't try to cultivate and even directly disperse the true essence in your body, you might be able to barely maintain your original state. At the very least, you might be able to delay the outbreak of your injuries. Upon hearing the words of the elder of heavenly secrets, Chen Changsheng retracted his gaze and asked, "Senior, how confident are you?" Regarding this matter, the elder of heavenly secrets had been calculating for a very long time while he was unconscious. He directly said, 20%. 20%. This was a rather awkward number. It could be said that there was hope, but it was a little uncertain. It could be said that there was despair, but it was clear that there was a path ahead. Today, Chen Changsheng learned many things about himself. But at the end of the road ahead, there was still a large shadow. If it had been anyone else, after going back and forth between hope and despair so many times, their spirit would have long since been on the verge of collapse. But he didn't. He even quickly got rid of his previous emotions and regained his true calmness. Tianji Lauren's expression did not change, but great waves were already surging in his heart. With this child's temperament, if not for the heavens not faking his fate, how could he not have obtained the great Tao? Chen Changsheng's willpower was truly terrifying. He recovered his calmness at an unimaginable speed, even forgetting the previous conversation. Then, he asked a very naive question. "Senior, which side are you on?" If anyone else were to ask the elder of heavenly secrets this question, they would assuredly suffer a miserable fate. However, Chen Changsheng's identity was very special, whether it was his relationship with the Pope, Shang, or the possible relationship with the Divine Empress. The elder of heavenly secrets actually replied in full detail. "My relationship with the Li Palace has always been good, but my relationship with Yin is not good. My relationship with your Zhou Empire is not good, but my relationship with the Empress is good. Then, if I really am crowned Prince Xiaoming, will the Divine Empress kill me?" Chen Changsheng's next question was not only naive and childish, it was even a bit excessive. What was even more outrageous was that the elder of heavenly secrets really did answer once more. "Based on my understanding of her ladyship, she will eventually. She has been waiting for 2 years, but she can't wait forever." "Why? Have you heard of the legend of defying the heavens and changing fate?" "Always thought it was just a rumor. Rumors often come from the truth, and sometimes the truth is even more bizarre than the rumors." Chen Changsheng was silent. There had always been a certain saying on the continent. Several hundred years ago, the Divine Empress was expelled from the imperial palace by Emperor Taizong. In the 100 Garden, she met 2 friends and learned of the secret of defying the heavens and changing fate. Those 2 friends are the current Pope and his master, the former principal of the Orthodox Academy, Shang Xingzhou. The Divine Empress swore to the starry sky that she was willing to sever her bloodline in exchange for this peerless achievement. "The bloodline has been severed," he muttered. The elder of heavenly secrets looked into his eyes and serenely said, "This fellow, fate, has never made a one-time deal. There is no such thing as an end to defying the heavens and changing one's fate. From offering sacrifices to the starry sky to returning to the sea of stars, it is ongoing at all times. If the Empress wants to succeed in defying the heavens and changing her fate, she cannot have any descendants. And if she does, then it is a gap in her fate, her greatest weakness. But if I really am crowned Prince Xiaoming, then the Empress she is my mother." When Chen Changsheng thought of this problem, his emotions became uncontrollably complex. The elder of heavenly secrets had a very calm expression, even somewhat callous. "The Empress once had many children, but they are all dead." Chen Changsheng asked, "And Princess Ping?" The elder of heavenly secrets replied, "Quite a few people, including me, know that Princess Ping is not the Empress's biological daughter, but she herself does not know." Upon hearing this news, Chen Changsheng was shocked speechless. Then, he realized that many things that he did not understand before were now answered. For example, the Divine Empress doted on Princess Ping, but her education was very problematic. For example, when Princess Ping wanted to compete with Su Yu Rong for favor, she would always lose. If the Empress has any descendant in this world, it can only be Su Yu Rong. The elder of heavenly secrets seemed to know what he was thinking and said, "Even though this is a spiritual and bloodline inheritance." Chun Chong Sheng fell silent for a very long time, then asked, "Since there has a good relationship with the Empress, why are you telling me these secrets?" The elder of heavenly secrets replied, "Because I hope to help you make the correct choice." As he said this, he glanced at the peach in Chun Chong Sheng's hand. The peach had already been peeled for a very long time. The color of the flesh had not changed, but it felt like it was no longer fresh. After a moment of silence, Chun Chong Sheng asked, "What can I choose?" The elder of heavenly secrets replied, "You can pretend to know nothing, return to the capital, and then be executed by the Empress, or you can choose to leave and conceal your identity, never to be seen again." Chun Chong Sheng raised his head and looked at him, asking, "But why is it up to me to choose?" "Because I do not wish for the Empress to once again face such a difficult choice." The elder of heavenly secrets was deeply moved. From the moment you enter the capital, she has always been hesitating. Otherwise, you would have long since died, a tiger eating its own child. What a tragedy. Chun Chong Sheng's nose twitched, and his breathing became rather coarse. Only those who were most familiar with him knew that this was a sign that he was in an extremely bad mood. In this past year, he had very rarely displayed this sort of behavior. So Luo Luo knew, Tang 36 knew, but not even Su Yurong knew. Then what about the children eaten by the tiger? What about the children eaten by the tiger? Aren't they even more sorrowful and miserable? He stared into the elder of heavenly secrets' eyes and said, "And I might not be crowned Prince Xiaoming. Even if I am, it shouldn't be up to me to make the choice. It should be her. Sir wants me to conceal my identity, never to be seen, so why can't she pretend to know nothing and do nothing?" The elder of heavenly secrets replied, "Because you have already appeared in the capital, so how can she pretend not to see you?" From the Orthodox Academy to the Ivy League gathering, from Mei Li Sha's announcement on the Divine Avenue of the Li Palace to first rank of the first banner in the grand examination, too many people have intentionally allowed the Empress to see you. Chun Chong Sheng asked, "So what if she sees me?" The elder of heavenly secrets replied, "If you really are crowned Prince Xiaoming, then you are the Empress's most fatal flaw in defying the heavens and changing fate. Every day you stay in the capital, every day she sees you, is an unimaginable torment for her. If she continues to ignore you, then you will ultimately become the bane of her fate. 2 years ago, on the night you fixed your fated star in the Orthodox Academy, many people actually sensed it, and in the last few days, I have been constantly calculating. In the end, I have confirmed that I was not wrong." After hearing this, Chun Chong Sheng fell silent for a very long time. The so-called starry sky, the so-called fate, they both appeared on the heavenly tome monoliths. The so-called defying the heavens, the so-called changing fate, they had all been recorded in Wang Zhiz's notebook. He had seen them, he had read them, and he clearly remembered that the lines formed by the stars on the heavenly tome monoliths were indefinite. In the opening chapter of Wang Zhiz's notebook, it was written, "There is no fate. There is no fate," he whispered. Nightfall has a chapter that I like very much, and it's also a chapter that many readers like. It's called Life is a Question, Various Kinds of Idiots. This chapter is about to talk about the question. Yes, just like Nightfall, it's about to solve the question. Chapter 582. The elder of heavenly secrets slightly creased his brow. "What did you say?" I said, "There's no such thing as fate." Chun Chong Sheng raised his head, his eyes calm and resolute. "Then there is naturally no fated bane." The elder of heavenly secrets solemnly said, "Fate is in the starry sky." Chun Chong Sheng replied, "Then I asked her to first calculate it clearly, then tell me who I am and what I should do, not let me decide what to do myself. There are not many things that I cannot calculate clearly, and there are very few people, and you are one of them." The elder of heavenly secrets' face suddenly became somewhat weathered. "Because your teacher can obscure the secrets of the heavens, and so can Blackrobe. If this is their scheme, I truly do not have the confidence to break it." Upon hearing the name of the demon military advisor, Chun Chongqing's mood became rather strange. This matter is related to Black Robe? If my expectations are correct, your departure from Xining to the capital was a scheme aimed at the Empress. Perhaps because the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had used up too much of his energy in persuading him. He seemed rather tired. I cannot calculate what they will do, but it is definitely related to you. Chen Changsheng fell silent once more. He recalled the words Su Yurong had said to him that night. He recalled the words Tang Tang had said to him in the Orthodox Academy long ago. Those words, and the words the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had said at the very beginning, all pointed directly at his teacher and the Pope. I will not cooperate. These were very simple words, but to Chen Changsheng, it took a long time before he could spit them out with difficulty. Because this meant that he was beginning to doubt his teacher and the Pope. Perhaps his teacher and the Pope were using him for a grand goal. Just like how Han Shan had heavily wounded the Demon Lord. He could endure it, but he did not like it. Once was fine, but not too many times. But what if you have always been a part of this scheme? What if you have always been living in a scheme? What if your existence itself is a scheme? The Elder of Heavenly Secrets did not drop the matter because of his answer. Instead, he asked 3 questions in an extremely unyielding and even callous manner. Moreover, this wasn't the end. There were still a few more questions that were akin to icy rain, slapping towards Chen Changsheng's face. If you really are Crown Prince Xiaoming, why did Principal Shang and the Pope want you to enter the capital? Could it be that they think they can hide from your Highness' all-seeing eye? No, they're even deliberately letting the Empress see you and pay attention to you. Why? Could it be that they want to send you to the Empress to be killed so that she can change her fate? Chen Changsheng, don't try to answer these questions, because when you see the answer, you will already be a part of the answer. Before all of this happens, leave and disappear. Don't let anyone find you again. Chen Changsheng didn't want to continue listening. He stood up, looked at the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, and said, "In truth, if you want to resolve this problem, there's an even simpler method." "What? You could just kill me now." "No, I won't kill you." "Why?" The Elder of Heavenly Secrets calmly replied, "Because I will not make the choice for the Empress." Chen Changsheng calmly gazed at him and said, "Then, I also ask that your Highness not make the choice for me." After saying this, he did not linger any longer. He turned and walked out into the thick fog outside the garden. Gazing at his back, the Elder of Heavenly Secrets said with some exhaustion, "Disappear just like Su Li. This is the greatest kindness to the world." Chen Changsheng stopped, but he said nothing. He took a bite of the peach in his hand and then walked into the fog. The fog gathered and dispersed. People left and people came. Not long after Chen Changsheng left, Su Yurong rowed a boat to the small island in the center of the lake and sat in the same position as before. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets said, "In truth, before you and Chen Changsheng, there was another person who also sat here." Su Yurong asked, "Who?" The Elder of Heavenly Secrets replied, "Lu Qing." Su Yurong thought about it and finally remembered this name. I asked Lu Qing what sort of person Chen Changsheng was. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets continued, "He very seriously thought about it for a very long time, and then he said to me, Chen Changsheng is a good person." For a world-renowned assassin to have such an evaluation of Chen Changsheng, Su Yurong felt rather strange. Then what about you? In your view, what sort of person is Chen Changsheng? The Elder of Heavenly Secrets calmly asked her. This question was asked too calmly. The Elder's eyes also too calmly, so calmly that it seemed like he knew many secrets. No one knew what Su Yurong was feeling. The white veil gently drifted in the lake wind, seeming to merge with the fog. Her voice pierced through the veil, very soft, very certain. He is a true person. Hearing this, the Elder of Heavenly Secrets was slightly moved. He had not expected Su Yurong to have such a high evaluation of him. Thinking of all the things that had happened to Chen Changsheng in these past 2 years, he realized that this evaluation was actually very accurate. To be able to maintain a pure and innocent heart in the secular world truly is not easy. The Elder of Heavenly Secrets sighed, then said, "Tell the Empress that if Chen Changsheng returns to the capital, kill him. Do not hesitate." The first sentence was praise, and the next sentence was to kill. Crowns covered the entire capital, and the people all desired to kill him. The garden was very quiet, the sound of the lake water lapping against the shore very clear. Su Yurong said nothing, only looked at the elder. The fluttering white veil could conceal her perfect face, but could not conceal her calm and unyielding gaze. The elder of heavenly secrets did not meet her gaze. Standing up, he clasped his hands behind his back and gazed at the surface of the lake beyond the fog. In an emotionless voice, he said, "If you are unwilling, then take him and leave. Use your emotions, your intentions, your white crane, your childhood. No matter what method you use, the further you go, the better." Su Yurong gazed at the elder's back and asked, "Just what did Sir calculate?" The elder of heavenly secrets did not turn around. He was unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. So I calculated for 3 days and 3 nights. It was still a dense fog, only a ray of light. Su Yurong muttered, "Light?" That light was incomparably clear, just like Su Li's sword. The elder of heavenly secrets finally said, "If he returns to the capital alive, the empress will die. What will you choose?" Returning to the house, Chun Chong stood by the railing and gazed at the great lake in front of him, but he did not feel at ease. He thought about what the elder of heavenly secrets had said. To leave like Su Li was the greatest kindness to the world. Then, where's the kindness this world has shown, Senior Su Li? Where's the kindness it has shown me? Leaning against the railing and facing the wind, he fell into a long silence. Chapter 583. The demon lord's appearance had placed an enormous pressure on Qin Changshan. The secret of his body had been discovered, and he was highly likely to have to face the greedy gazes of the entire world. The conversation on the island had placed even more pressure on him. It was also the secret of his body. His severed meridians would cause him to die in the near future, and this was also known by others. It turned out that those severed meridians had been blasted open by the sun wheel. It turned out that he really was a descendant of the Chan imperial clan. Then was he Crown Prince Xiaoming? If he was a descendant of the Chan imperial clan, then their meeting by the stream 16 years ago was naturally not a coincidence. His teacher had presumably long known of his background, but did his senior brother also know? This was the greatest pressure on him. He had to face many things squarely. If the demon lord's appearance in Mount Han really was a trap, then it meant that he might have been abandoned. If his journey from Xining village to the capital was also a trap, then just what sort of role had he been playing this entire time? In the past, whether it was applying to the 6 IVs or participating in the grand examination, no matter what sort of obstacles or difficulties he encountered, he was never too worried. This was because he believed that his roots were in Xining village's old temple, that his true confidence lay in his teacher and senior brother. Now, he realized that all this might have been an illusion. His trust was no longer as certain. So how could his Tao heart be as serene as before? If he could not even trust Senior Yuran, who could he rely on in this world? Chun Changshan was often praised by others for possessing a composure that far exceeded his age, but he was still just a 16-year-old youth. When matters had developed to this point, developed to this state, he finally found it somewhat unbearable. He stared in a daze at the mist on the surface of the lake, his mood rather sad. Footsteps suddenly came from the platform. Tang 36 and Zhishio walked over. They looked at Chun Changsheng's back, somewhat worried. Ever since Chun Changsheng had returned, he had not spoken. He seemed extremely silent, even somewhat lonely. It was obvious that something had happened. Just what did the Elder of Heavenly Secrets say to you? Tang 36 ultimately could not hold back and walked to his side. Chun Changsheng leaned against the railing, still unwilling to speak. He seemed rather perplexed. Zhishio suddenly said, "I don't believe that there are problems in this world that cannot be solved." Chun Changsheng straightened his body and turned to him. He very seriously asked, "If there are, then what?" Zhishio's answer was very much in line with his personality, simple and unyielding. "At worst, it's just death." Tang 36 added, "And even if you want to die, it's not that easy." Chun Changsheng looked at them and suddenly said, "Do any of you believe that I am Crown Prince Xiaoming?" When he didn't want to say anything, he naturally wouldn't say anything. But in the end, he was still somewhat unwilling, so he opened his mouth and said the most important thing. Hearing this, Tang 36 glanced at Jishio, somewhat nervous. Actually, this rumor had long existed in the capital, but no matter if it was him or Chun Changsheng himself, they both felt that it was too ridiculous, so they didn't take it seriously. But since Chun Changsheng had asked such a formal question, it meant that the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had told Chun Changsheng about this matter, and there was a possibility that it was true. Jishio remained expressionless and gave Tang 36 no help. Tang 36's expression froze for a second, and then he laughed. He looked at Chun Changsheng and said, "What the hell are you talking about? That's a few years difference." Chun Changsheng didn't laugh. He quietly looked in his eyes and said, "Don't you often say that I'm precocious and that I'm like an old man? Just because you're precocious means that you can grow a few more years? Could it be that the precocious pigs of Black Mountain Hollow are all older than their brethren?" Tang 36 said with a face full of ridicule. Chun Changsheng did not get angry at such an inelegant comparison, nor did he laugh. He continued to earnestly ask, "If I am, then what?" Tang 36 grew quiet. He looked at him and earnestly said, "Even if you are, so what? Just treat this as a plate of pig's ears, a salad." Chun Changsheng knew that he was advising him to ignore it, but will the Divine Empress let me live? Tang 36 asked. In the Garden of Zhou, is Nank prepared to let you live? On the mountain path, is the Demon Lord prepared to let you live? Chun Changsheng understood what he meant, and the perplexed expression on his face gradually faded. Just because other people want you to die doesn't mean that you have to die, no matter who it is, Nank, the Demon Lord, or the Empress. Tang 36 looked into his eyes and said, "Think on the bright side. If you really are crowned Prince Xiaoming, then as long as you survive, you will be the #1 successor to the throne of the Great Zhou." When he said these words, his expression was extremely serious, but the contents of his words were not serious at all. He knew that Chun Changsheng had no interest in something like the throne. He just wanted to use these words to lighten the oppressive atmosphere. Speaking of which, the Pope or the Emperor of the Great Zhou, which one is better? He asked Chun Changsheng with a smile. Chun Changsheng did not answer this question. The one who answered was Jishio. The wolf youth who had always been extremely apathetic to the affairs of the world somewhat clumsily suggested, "It's still better to be the emperor. He has an army under his command and 38 divine generals. In the future, he will be the commander-in-chief in the war against the demons. Truly wonderful. Having this sort of friend is truly wonderful." Chun Changsheng thought to himself. He didn't know if Xining Village was fabricated, didn't know if his existence was fabricated, but he could at least confirm that his days in the capital were incomparably real. "Thank you," he said to Tang 36 and Jishio, and then he sensed something and said, "I have some matters that I need to take care of first." Jishio did not know what he needed to take care of, but Tang 36 very easily guessed, especially when he sensed the ripples of qi from his magical artifact and saw the figure of a skirt flitting across the white sand and shallow water below. This made him very depressed, thinking to himself, as expected of a guy who forgets his friends at the sight of beauty. That date stone quietly lay in the white sand, in the clear water of the lake. Perhaps because it carried her qi, this date stone became an object that many of the fish in the lake were extremely willing to get close to. Its surface had been pecked clean and was extremely glossy. It looked just like a stone carved with a few lines. Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong sat on the edge of the platform, their feet submerged in the lake. They did not intentionally sit closer, their shoulders occasionally lightly touching. This sort of distance, this sort of rhythm, this sort of tranquility was what they were most accustomed to and also what they liked the most, just like how they felt about each other. Su Yurong softly said, "To have this sort of friend is something to be very happy about." Chun Changsheng said, "You don't have this sort of friend?" Then he remembered that since she was young, she was the little princess that the entire capital cared for, the successor that the divine queen and the saintess carefully cultivated. From the age of 5, she had already left the ordinary world, so it was indeed very difficult for her to have ordinary, but extremely precious friends. Su Yurong slightly smiled and said, "All the senior and junior sisters in the temple, even the elders except for the teacher, are very respectful to me, so there is no way for us to casually chat. But I do have some acquaintances in a town at the foot of the mountain that I can talk to. I will introduce them to you in the future." Hearing this, Chun Changsheng was a little curious, thinking to himself, how could there be acquaintances in a normal town? If we really talk about friends, actually the seniors and juniors in the mountain are more similar, but since we are not in the same place, the chances of contact are relatively small. I heard that the place where Qiushan Jun practices the sword is not far from Ci Jian Temple. What do you want to ask? Nothing. Okay, you are not wrong. I've always treated my senior as an extremely important friend. The problem is, he will definitely not think that way. Princess Luo has taken you as her master, but I don't know what she is thinking. I can't outtalk you, because you are unreasonable. Fine. Why aren't you saying anything? What do you want to hear? Are you really Crown Prince Xiaoming? The wooden platform below the small building instantly became quiet. The lake water lightly swayed, the white sand was still and motionless, and the fish were swimming far away, as if sensing the change in the atmosphere. Chun Changsheng was silent for a very long time, then said, "I don't know, but I don't think so." Su Yurong slightly tilted her head, lightly leaning on his shoulder. Chapter 584. In the garden of Zhou, when she was heavily injured, she had leaned on his shoulder. Later on, she had never been this close to him, not even on those snowy nights in the capital. This was a true leaning. She had placed her body and weight on his shoulder. What passed over was not only the girl's chi and warmth, but also comfort and intentions. Qin Changxing accepted it, and his mood became less heavy. "Relax, I'm fine," Su Yurong softly said. "But since Heavenly Secrets thinks this way, the Empress will assuredly think the same." Chun Changxing was quiet for a while, then said, "I have no way of stopping what other people think." Su Yurong knew that this was a matter that could not be helped. She also had no way of stopping what the Empress thought. Just as Chun Changsheng had said that night, the Empress had never been a good person in the ordinary sense of the word, and it was very difficult to use the ethics and morals of an ordinary person to view her. The rumors say that after the Empress was banished to the 100-Her Garden by Emperor Taizong, she met my master and His Holiness the Pope, and only then did she grasp the method to defy the heavens and change fate. In this way, they should have been two people of the same path that deeply trusted each other. So why did they later become mortal enemies? No one knows what exactly happened before the bloody incident of the Orthodox Academy. I only vaguely heard that the Empress and Principal Shang made some sort of agreement, but the Empress did not follow through on the agreement, so the two became enemies. That agreement presumably was about the imperial throne. It should be. Why was the Empress not willing to return the imperial throne to a member of the imperial clan? I asked her this question many years ago. The Empress said that it was because the Chan imperial clan did not have a single descendant capable of shouldering the imperial throne. There are several hundred descendants of the imperial clan scattered throughout the provinces and counties. Is there not a single person capable of shouldering the heavy responsibility of the country? Qin Changxing didn't finish this sentence. Su Yurong understood what he meant and said, "There isn't." Qin Changxing said, "I hear that the Prince of Xiang of Prince Chun Lu's bloodline has a rather decent reputation." That's just a superficial reputation. When the Prince of Xiang was mentioned, a hint of derision appeared on Su Yurong's face. In truth, this prince has been licentious since he was a child. He was originally extremely talented in cultivation, reaching the great accomplishment of his son Wheel at the age of 10. But in the end, because of his own character, he never had any hope of stepping into the divine domain. Is stepping into the divine domain very important to inheriting the throne? Yes, very important. Why? If you want to become the sovereign of the human race, the first thing you need is not virtue, but power. If he wanted to become the sovereign of the human race, he would need great power. This was not difficult to understand, because the demons were in the north, and their evil intentions had not died. This world could be flooded at any time, and the flames of war would spread. By the same logic, if one wanted to live a better life, free from anxiety and fear, one would need greater strength. Any external things could only improve one's mood, boost one's confidence, and enrich one's life, but they couldn't solve the root of the problem. Friendship and love are beautiful and can sometimes save your life and soul, but the most reliable thing is still your own strength. Entering Mount Han, encountering the Demon Lord, learning many secrets from the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, Chen Changsheng faced an unimaginable pressure, but it was also a motivation. He had to increase his strength as quickly as possible. At the very least, he could not be like he was when he encountered the Demon Lord on the mountain path, where he did not even have a chance to retaliate. Even though he had countless magical artifacts and treasures, he could not display their full power and could only wait for death to come. He decided to find an opportunity during the Boiling Stone Summit to break into star condensation. When he received the yellow paper umbrella from the Tangol Master in Wenshui, he was only at the upper level of ethereal opening, but he was able to endure the full-powered attack of a peak star condensation expert. If he really could successfully break into star condensation, the yellow paper umbrella might be able to survive under the gaze of the Demon Lord and the Divine Empress for a little longer. That period of time would not be too long, perhaps only a few breaths, but it was still extremely important to him. Because besides the yellow paper umbrella, he still had the myriad swords in the sheath and the heavenly tome monoliths that had transformed into stone pearls. Most importantly, he still had the Garden of Zhou. After breaking into star condensation, even someone as powerful as the Demon Lord or the Divine Empress would find it very difficult to directly sever his connection to space. Then he only needed to buy a very short amount of time to hide in the Garden of Zhou. These were external pressures and needs. His decision to break into star condensation was more for his internal mental needs. Only by becoming stronger could he be calmer in the face of the unforeseeable road ahead. The dual mental pressures from both external and internal were so intense and direct. As for the words the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had said in the garden, he had already intentionally forgotten them. If he did not continue cultivating or even scattered the true essence in his body, would he be able to delay the eruption of the injuries to his meridians for a period of time? How long was a period of time? 1 year? 2 years? What was the difference between 20 and 22? More importantly, even if he wanted to struggle at death's door, would he, who had lost his strength, be allowed to continue living? After making his decision, Chen Changxing used an unimaginable willpower to shake off that frightening pressure and regain his calm. Only Su Yurong, Tang 36, and Zhixiu, the people closest to him, were still unable to relax and were even more worried. Because this sort of calm was somewhat unreasonable, somewhat frightening, just like the ocean before the arrival of the storm. The storm had not arrived, but the people participating in the Boiling Stone Summit had arrived one after another. Logically speaking, the cultivators participating in the summit should have all arrived several days ago. But because of that great incident, the Heavenstone Array had sealed off all of Mount Han for a period of time. As a result, some of the unlucky or extremely lucky cultivators had been stopped outside the mountain for a period of time. With Chen Changxing's current status, he naturally did not need to welcome anyone. He calmly rested in his house, preparing for his breakthrough. Naturally, there would be people reporting to him. After Zhonghui, Scholarly Manor sent 2 more teachers. To his regret, Wangpa did not come. It seemed that the heaven stones of Mount Han, to an expert of his level, truly did not have much value in comprehending them. The people from the Mount Li's sword sect arrived. Qiushan Jun, who had not appeared in public for a very long time, still did not appear. For some reason, Chen Changsheng sighed in relief. It was probably because he also did not know how he should react if he saw Su Yurong and that proud son of heaven conversing intimately. The people that came were all old friends or acquaintances. Go Hanshi, Guan Feibai, and Liang Banhu had all arrived. Upon hearing this news, Chen Changsheng was rather happy. It really is like the Ivy Festival or the Grand Examination from 2 years ago. It's still the same people. Zhixiu replied, One person is missing. Chun Changsheng stared blankly. He realized that Zheshio's face was rather cold, and then he remembered that Qi Jian had not appeared. Tang 36 patted Zheshio on the shoulder to comfort him. Chun Changsheng stood by the railing, looking at the bustling scene in the distance. Hearing the faint voice of Guan Fei Bai, he wanted to go over, but there was no way. It was still the same words. His current status was different. As the successor to the Pope, it was not convenient for him to visit any elder of any sect or young geniuses like the Divine State's 7 laws. It's fine. Go Hanshi has always done things prudently. He will definitely immediately pay you a visit. Tang 36 said, then glanced at Zheshio. I know how you feel, and I also don't like those guys, but in a little while, can you not be too disgruntled? After all, we are currently representing the Orthodox Academy, so we have to maintain Chun Changsheng's dignity. Just as Tang 36 predicted, Go Hanshi and the other disciples of the Mountly Sword sect had just been welcomed to the lakeshore by the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets. Without resting, they simply washed up and came to pay a visit. Just as Tang 36 predicted, Zheshio's complexion was truly very unsightly. Guan Feibai's complexion was also very unsightly, because he had to follow Go Hanshi in bowing to Chun Changsheng. Liang Ban's expression was rather complex, because although Liang Xiaoxiao had been proven to have committed suicide in the Garden of Zhou, it was still related to Chun Changsheng. Chun Changsheng could sit in a chair and accept the bows of the Mountly Sword sect disciples. In this year, many changes had occurred, but on the mountain path, when Zhonghui bowed to him, he had responded with the courtesy of someone of the same generation, let alone now. Seeing Chun Changsheng very seriously return the greeting without any reluctance, Liang Ban's expression became somewhat gentler, and Guan Feibai's complexion finally improved. However, when he saw that Zheshio's complexion was still so unsightly, his complexion became even more unsightly, and his words also became unpleasant. I'm warning you, don't have any improper thoughts about my junior sister. Tang 36 had previously advised Zheshio to calm down, but now that he heard Guan Feibai's words, he had long since forgotten the word calm. He looked at Guan Feibai and sneered. What do you mean improper thoughts? Is your junior sister a princess? Even if she's the demon lord's granddaughter, no one in Shuilao City would recognize her. When it came to quarreling, there were truly very few people who were Tang 36's match. Firstly, it was because he was the young master of a noble clan with a deep background, yet he did not have the demeanor of a young master, not caring about the word reputation the slightest. Secondly, it was because his words were sharp and focused on attacking his opponent's vitals, making them extremely difficult to defend against. Just like this short sentence of his. It had clearly been a spur-of-the-moment idea, but it had taken a few turns in the middle, and then his sword had stabbed straight at the Mountly Sword sect's greatest secret and greatest problem. Even someone as good-tempered as Go Hanshi could not help but frown and glance behind him. Even Chun Changsheng, who had long since grown accustomed to his conduct, could not help but shake his head and glance outside the hall. The priests of the Orthodoxy and the accompanying disciples of the Mountly Sword sect that had followed Go Hanshi and the other two into the house understood and hurriedly retreated. The two sides had only just met, and there were already signs of a falling out. Who knew what would happen in the house next? The people involved might not care, but they did not dare to participate or even listen. Chapter 585. Guan Feibai's personality was both ruthless and violent. How could he possibly endure this? He coldly rebuked. A piece of trash like you that only knows how to spend your family's money dares to criticize the matters of my Mountly. Tang 36 jeered. My family is just that rich. What does it have to do with you? And besides, I used 3 days last year to earn a Clear Lake restaurant. Do I have to tell you? Guan Feibai coldly snorted. Then what does the matter between my Mountly Sword sect and that wolf cub have to do with you? If you're really that bored, then you might as well seize the time to learn a few more sword styles. Otherwise, how could the stately sole grandson of the Tang clan not even be able to enter the proclamation of golden distinction? Tang 36 paled at these words. It must be known that not being able to enter the proclamation of golden distinction was his greatest regret. Although his mood had improved somewhat upon learning that Jashio and Sumayu had also failed to enter the proclamation, it had to be known that this fellow's name was currently on the proclamation of golden distinction. He clenched his teeth and said, "No matter how you put it, Jashio and Qi Jian are in love with each other. What right do you have to control them? If you're really that bored and have no way of surpassing Zhonghui, then you might as well practice your own culinary skills. F***CK, green peppers, stir-fried bacon, and you actually put sugar in it? Is there something wrong with your brain? Or are you people of the South also eccentric when cooking? Besides Chun Changsheng, who else can make delicious food?" Guan Feibai was enraged. "Let alone cooking, you break 7 out of 10 dishes just to wash the dishes, and you still have the face to say that my culinary skills are bad?" This was naturally the story of the time, when they were viewing the monoliths and comprehending the Tao in the mausoleum of books, when they lived in the small courtyard Sun Mei had left behind. The relationship between the Orthodox Academy and the Mount Li sword sect was truly rather complicated. It was very difficult to explain with a few simple sentences, especially between the youths of this generation. Whether it was because of that engagement, or because the entire world knew of the relationship between Xiao Shanjun and Su Yurong, or because of the competition between them. From the Ivy Festival to the Grand Examination, at the very beginning, the two sides were naturally opponents, even enemies. But in the Mausoleum of Books, the two sides lived under the same roof, ate from the same pot, viewed the monoliths, comprehended the Tao, and exchanged their experiences. Their enmity gradually faded, and they became familiar with each other. Especially after Chen Changsheng escorted Su Li south, the two sides had developed quite a friendship. But they were all young people, young cultivation geniuses. The youngsters of the Tradition Academy and the 6 laws of the Divine Kingdom of Lishan Sword Sect were the most favored and were often compared. The competition between the two sides seemed to be going on for a long time. Who would really be convinced? The atmosphere in the small building became more and more tense. Tang 36 and Guan Fei Bai's argument became louder and more intense. Even though in the end, both sides still retained some of their rationality, especially Tang 36. He didn't directly curse the other's ancestors like he did with the challengers from the Ivy Academies. But in the end, they still argued for real. Guan Feibai's face was very pale. It was not because he had applied powder, nor was it because he was injured, but because he was angered. "Senior, I can't bear it anymore. I want to challenge him in the Boiling Stone Summit." These words caused Liang Bana's expression to subtly change. It must be known that before coming, Go Hanshi had already told them that although the Mount Li sword sect and the Orthodox Academy could not be considered allies, they were not enemies either. In the Boiling Stone Summit, unless absolutely necessary, it was best not to fight with each other. Tang 36 was also angered. He yelled, "Chen Changsheng, you can bear it, but I can't. In the Boiling Stone Summit, you have to beat this guy into a pig's head." As they said this, they very naturally turned to look at Go Hanshi and Chen Changsheng. Yet where were the figures of Go Hanshi and Chen Changsheng? Where are they? Tang 36 asked in shock. "They left," Zheshio said, then turned to Guan Fei Bai and said with an indifferent expression, "In the summit, I will challenge you." Saying this, he also turned and left the small building. Guan Fei Bai stared blankly for a moment before reacting. Looking at Zheshio's back, he sneered, "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Tang 36 sneered on the side. "If you're not afraid of him, why were you so stunned for a moment?" Guan Fei Bai flew into a rage. "If you have the ability, then go up yourself. One moment you're yelling at Chen Changsheng, the next moment you're letting him. Do you know what shame is?" Tang 36's expression did not change. "I don't even want face, so how would I know what shame is? Not satisfied? Then bite me." Chen Changsheng and Go Hanshi had long since left the room and arrived at the high balcony. Standing by the railing, they looked at the lake. They knew very well that the quarrel in the building would not end in a short time, and that there was no meaning. Listening there would only pollute their ears. Just why? Chun Changsheng looked at Go Hanshi and asked very seriously, "The mixed blood of humans and demi-humans truly is looked down upon, but I know very well that the Mountly Sword sect, at least Senior Su Li, is not this kind of person. Why does he have to stop this marriage?" Go Hanshi knew that Chun Changsheng was a very direct person. Without a sufficient reason, it was impossible to convince him, so he said straightforwardly, "Zheshio doesn't have long to live." Chun Changsheng had thought of many reasons. Through Su Yurong's help, he had also heard similar arguments, but he didn't think that it really was like this. Zheshio's body truly does have hidden dangers, but they can definitely be cured. He had treated Zheshio for a very long time, and even now, he had not stopped treating him. He knew that a strange illness like the tide rush of blood was truly very difficult to completely cure, but through the reconstruction of Luoluo and Xianyuan Po's meridians, he had gained a lot of experience in this aspect. He was confident that sooner or later he would be able to come up with the most perfect treatment. Go Hanshi glanced at him in surprise and asked, "You know?" Chun Changsheng replied, "I've already begun to treat him." Go Hanshi thought for a while, then shook his head. "Martial Granduncle has determined that he will die young. You have no way of curing him." Chun Changsheng replied, "In other aspects, I am inferior to Senior Su Li, but in this aspect, he is inferior to me." Go Hanshi thought of the widely circulated lineage of his master and realized that this was indeed the case. At present, Daoist Ji was not very famous in the world, but several hundred years ago, he was the world's most outstanding doctor. Moreover, his true identity was Principal Shang of the Orthodox Academy. "You can convince me, but on this matter, you first have to convince Martial Granduncle," Go Hanshi said. "Otherwise, I will not agree to Zheshio going to Mountly to see her." Chun Changsheng replied, "There's no need to be like this. It's just a meeting. I guarantee that nothing else will happen." Go Hanshi calmly looked at him and said, "That is Mountly, the sect of 10,000 swords. Don't think of those elopement stories written in storybooks. The youths of the Orthodox Academy truly did have this sort of idea, and had even made preparations in secret. Now that they had been so easily exposed, Chun Changsheng couldn't help but feel somewhat embarrassed. If you're sure that you can cure Zheshio's illness, then why can't you wait until you've truly cured him before discussing this matter?" Go Hanshi had spoken of a very crucial problem. Chun Changsheng replied, "Lovesickness is also an illness. Zheshio's side is still fine, but what about Qi Jian?" Go Hanshi thought of his junior sister's angry shouts on that night, and didn't know how to respond. After a while, he said, "I will pass on your words to her." Chun Changsheng was somewhat at ease. He thought, if I can hold on to hope, Qi Jian's days at Mountly will probably be a little better. From the moment I left Hubei until today, I've already driven 3,000 kilometers. I'm so tired that I'm an idiot. For the next 2 days, I still have to run 700 kilometers every day. I really can't write anymore. I'll ask for 2 days of leave. After returning to the Qing Kingdom, I'll return to my normal state of work as quickly as possible and firmly write down the first climax of Heaven's Chosen. Chapter 586. When one did not see eye to eye, besides not speaking, one could also change the subject. Chun Changsheng was not good at chatting, but that did not mean that Go Hanshi was not good at it. Moreover, he truly did have some matters that he wished to obtain an accurate answer from Chun Changsheng. Was it really that person that entered Mount Han? Chun Changsheng nodded. Go Hanshi was quiet for a while before he could digest the shock in his heart. He sighed. "The demon lord personally attacked, but you were still able to survive. In the future, you will surely have good fortune." Chun Changsheng shook his head. He was keenly aware that the demon lord had come to Mount Han to eat him. If he had only wanted to kill him, there was no way he could have survived. From the house by the lake, the occasional sound of fierce quarreling could be heard, like the cry of swords. On the balcony of the house, Chun Changsheng and Go Hanshi stood side by side, their clothes fluttering in the wind. On a distant rock, Zhong Hui quietly watched the activity in that direction. He said nothing, his thoughts inscrutable. By the lake were many cultivators from the various sections. They were looking at the distant Chun, Changsheng, and Go Hanshi, and some were also looking at Zhonghui. Seeing these scenes, seeing the youths in these scenes, whether it was the experts of the pavilion of heavenly secrets or the elders of the various sects, they all felt very emotional. In the last 2 years, many outstanding young, cultivating geniuses had appeared on the continent. Chun Changsheng and Go Hanshi, those two seemingly childish fellows arguing in the house, and even Zhonghui standing on the rock were all among them. Not to mention Su Yurong and Xiu Shanjun. At such a similar age, there were actually so many talented young geniuses. It was truly an extremely rare thing. Apart from Wang Po's generation. No, even Wang Po's generation was inferior to these young people when they were so young. If one wanted to make a comparison, perhaps one really had to go back to the magnificent, great era of 1,000 years ago. It truly was an era of blooming wildflowers. I wonder which of these youths will be the most outstanding after so many years. No matter who is the most outstanding in the end, I think that we should all thank Shinchangshin. Why? Because that night of starlight in the mausoleum of books helped these youths break through that most difficult of barriers. The chatter stopped, and the scene became quiet. The elders of the various sects and the experts of the pavilion of heavenly secrets recalled the life and death situation they and their peers had when they broke through to ethereal opening. When they looked at these young geniuses again, their gazes became rather complex, filled with envy and even jealousy. And all of this was because of Chun Changsheng. The forced postponement of the Boiling Stone Summit finally began on an ordinary and unremarkable day at the end of summer. It was held in that elegant and gorgeous pavilion on the shore of the Heaven Lake. But because of the Demon Lord's appearance in Mount Han, the atmosphere was somewhat oppressive. Moreover, compared to previous years, there were far fewer famous people attending, making it somewhat boring. Not a single one of the top 10 experts of the Proclamation of Liberation was present. Perhaps they were like painted armor Xiao Zhang, who regarded the grand assembly of Boiling Stone as nothing, or perhaps they were like Liang Wang's son, who found it inconvenient to attend for some reason. The most miserable was naturally the demi-human expert Xiaoda. He had been too heavily injured by the Demon Lord and had been sent back to White Emperor City a few days ago. Fortunately, the Orthodoxy had sent out an enormous force. Besides the future Pope Chun Changsheng, there were also 2 prefects, Linghai Zhuang and Mao Qiuyu. The Holy Maiden of the South, Su Yurong, had also personally come. This could be considered giving the pavilion of heavenly secrets enough face, as well as giving the cultivators that had traveled tens of thousands of li to participate in the Boiling Stone Summit a great deal of spirit. As the host, the elder of heavenly secrets sat at the very center. Su Yurong, who had the most exalted status, sat to his right, behind layers of white gauze. Qin Changsheng sat on the opposite side. To the cultivators from the various lands, the elder of heavenly secrets naturally had an exalted status and was also very mysterious. To be able to see his true appearance with their own eyes today was naturally a very precious opportunity. However, the vast majority of gazes still rested on Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong. These gazes were filled with reverence, yearning, and of course, even more so with curiosity. This was especially true for those cultivators that did not come from the capital. The current world was extremely clear about everything about Su Yurong and Chun Changsheng. This summer, he and she had not even reached 17. They were the youngest upper-level ethereal opening cultivators in history. Most importantly, she was the Holy Maiden of the South, and he was the next pope. To be able to reach such a level of cultivation at such a young age and even possess such status was rarely seen in history. They had once been engaged. If not for a few unexpected occurrences, they would have become husband and wife. If this point was taken into account, this story would seem even more legendary. When everyone's gazes rested on Chun Changsheng and Su Yurong, the steward's voice from the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets seemed to fade into the distance, replaced by countless whispers. This young man and woman were truly far too famous. Their story was also truly too famous. the young Taoist, entered the capital and was despised by the divine general's estate. The marriage contract appeared at the Ivy Festival, and as the events of the world changed, the young man became the successor to the Pope. The divine general's estate wished to renew their former fate, but they were cruelly slapped in the face and forced to break off the engagement. However, after the snowstorm on the Bridge of Helplessness, the young man and the young woman met for the first time, and the situation seemed to have changed once more. Chen Changsheng seemed to want to change his mind and marry a beautiful girl into his household, but he was coldly rejected by Su Yurong. Thus, many people knew of the scene of the young man standing in the snow in front of the palace on a snowy night. Twists and turns, climaxes rising one after another. If this had not happened in reality, everyone would have believed it to be a play, and the most cliché kind at that. And the most cliché was also the most brilliant, the one the masses loved to see and hear the most. Today, many people had finally seen the male and female leads of this play. How could they not be curious and excited? Chen Changsheng and Su Yurong did nothing. They just sat there, yet they had seized 90% of the attention of the crowd and taken all the glory of the gathering. But in the end, this was the Boiling Stone Summit. No matter how much the crowd wanted to stare at them, they had to temporarily shift their gazes to the black table at the end of the path. On the table was an ancient red lacquer plate, and on the plate rested a black stone about the size of a fruit pit. Black table, red plate, black stone. Black and red alternated, exceptionally bright and abnormally dazzling. Chen Changsheng's gaze rested on the black stone and found it difficult to shift away. His expression did not change, but his heart was slightly disturbed. This was not one of those stones he had seen in the sky a few days ago, nor was it one of those stones that could be seen everywhere in the lake or between the cliffs. Mount Han was littered with heaven stones. This was something Su Yurong had confirmed with him, yet this stone was clearly somewhat different from the others. This stone was much smaller than those heaven stones, and it had been carefully placed on the red plate, so its treatment was very different. Crucially, he could faintly sense a familiar ripple of qi from this small black stone. He gazed at the nearby heavy curtains. Su Yurong sat behind the curtains. Rushing about is hard, but also a blessing. In these past few days, I've run several thousand kilometers through the great rivers and mountains of my motherland, and I've seen many stones. In a few days, if I have the time and the energy to chat with everyone, I'll give a good report. If I don't have the time and the energy, then I'll keep it and treat it as my own life experience. In short, traveling 10,000 li is truly a wonderful thing. Chapter 587. The gauze curtain could block the prying eyes of others, but it could not block the already connected minds between the two. Su Yurong looked at him and knew what he was thinking. After thinking for a moment, she lightly shook her head. The reason why Chen Changsheng felt that it was somewhat familiar was not only because the small black stone on the red plate was very similar in shape to the small black stone that he had, but also because the qi rippling from the small black stone was very similar to the small black stone that he had found in the pavilion of ascending mist. In other words, the small black stone that the pavilion of divination had taken out might be related to Wang Jisoo. The little black stone that Wang Jitsa had left behind in the Lingyan Pavilion was a heavenly tone monolith. So could this little black stone be another heavenly tone monolith? After going to the mausoleum of books and the mausoleum of Zhou, and conversing with divine General Han Qing, he and Su Yurong were the clearest about the whereabouts of the heavenly tone monoliths that had been lost to the world, so they could not help but have some suspicions. In the past, the Boiling Stone assemblies had all taken out ordinary heaven stones, so those elders and important figures of the various sects who had participated in the Boiling Stone assemblies were also rather astonished. But those cultivators who were participating in the Boiling Stone Summit for the first time did not understand the difference. When they noticed Chen Changsheng looking towards the heavy curtains, they couldn't help but become very excited, thinking to themselves, little Principal Chen really does have deep feelings for his former fiancée. Most of the Xiaxingists from the south were sitting in the same direction as Holy Maiden Peak. At this moment, they noticed Chen Changsheng's gaze. Many of their faces revealed expressions of mockery or sympathy. Some disciples of Holy Maiden Peak thought about the incident of the annulment of the engagement in the capital and couldn't help but mock Chen Changsheng. They mocked Chen Changsheng for being so clingy and boring. Some people even pointed out that Chen Changsheng needed to look at himself in the mirror. Some things can't be done just because you don't want them. None of the southern cultivators directly mentioned Chen Changsheng's name, but everyone knew that these words were referring to him. This world-famous engagement had experienced far too many twists and turns, stirring up far too many storms. It was only last winter, when the Pope forcefully annulled the engagement, that it finally came to an end. In this story, in the beginning, Chen Changsheng was naturally the one who was insulted and hurt, but in the end, it was Su Yurong who had to bear all the humiliation. In their minds, the person who hated Chen Changsheng the most in the world was obviously Su Yurong. She was the holy maiden of the South, the heavenly phoenix true maiden that was adored and loved by countless people. She did not like Chen Changsheng, so there were naturally many people who did not like Chen Changsheng, especially the cultivators of the South. It was only natural that they would not treat Chen Changsheng well. Even if he was the future pope, they still had to vent the holy maiden's anger. The pavilions and terraces were all within the cool breeze, quiet and beautiful. Those mocking words towards Chen Changsheng were like willow catkins that were being blown away by the wind, constantly floating on the plaza and falling into everyone's ears. The orthodoxy priests had rather unsightly complexions. Mao Qiuyu was calm and silent, and Ling Haizhuang's thick brows were slightly raised in interest. Chen Changsheng retracted his gaze from the Holy Maiden Peak and touched his knees uncomfortably. Zhishio did not care about these matters, but Tang 36 knew the inside story, so he gave a brilliant smile. From time to time, the brilliant sword light lit up on the stone floor between the pavilions, like the lightning that was commonly seen in summer, and also like the soul-stirring strokes on the murals. Other than the Great Zhou army, represented by Star Caesar Academy, the vast majority of the world's cultivators were still most accustomed to using the sword. Today's Boiling Stone Summit had seemingly never ceased with the sword glows. The cultivators that had the right to participate in the Boiling Stone Summit were all extremely talented geniuses, or at the very least, outstanding in potential and powerful in cultivation. At the very least, they were an entire level stronger than they had been in the Grand Examination and the Garden of Zhou. Those that had the courage to walk onto the stone platform and challenge others, or perhaps those that had the right to be challenged, were at least at the middle level of ethereal opening. The matches that had already concluded had been carried out extremely brilliantly. Both sides had used their supreme techniques, not holding back at all, and under the watchful eyes of the powerful figures of the pavilion of heavenly secrets and orthodoxy, it was impossible for any overly serious accidental injuries to occur. However, it was inevitable that a few bloodstains would still be left on the stone platform. Although Chen Changsheng was very interested in the black stone, he had no intention of entering the stage, so naturally no one came to challenge him. With his current status, unless he wanted to, no one could force him to accept a challenge, just like last summer. Su Yurong's current status was even higher than his, so it was even less likely that she would participate in this matter. Thus, they quietly sat by the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, watching the matches on the stone platform. Somewhat strangely, as time passed, there was still no one who challenged the other two from the Orthodox Academy. Zhishio only watched for a while, before closing his eyes to rest. He did not seem to have much interest in those brilliant matches. Tang 36, on the other hand, was rather bored. He incessantly ordered the maids of the pavilion of heavenly secrets to change the tea in his cup and comment on the snacks on his plate. Only when a certain person walked onto the platform did Zhishio open his eyes. Tang 36 put down the teacup in his hand and took out a silk handkerchief to wipe the corner of his mouth, his expression turning serious. The one who entered the platform was Liang Banhu. His opponent was an expert from the emotion-severing sect from Hanqiu City. This expert from the emotion-severing sect had previously used an extremely spectacular myriad willows sword to easily defeat a female disciple of Gentle Stream Temple. He was around 30 years old, and his cultivation had already reached the upper level of ethereal opening. If it was in the past, he would definitely be worthy of the praise of a genius. It was just that in recent years, there had been too many cultivators who were younger than him, had even more outstanding talent, and had stronger cultivation. Liang Banhu was a disciple of the Mount Li Sword sect, ranked 5th among the Divine State 7 laws, so he was naturally the representative of these youths. Perhaps it was because he had just defeated a southern cultivator and his confidence was at its peak, or perhaps it was because the Divine State's 7 laws had stolen too much of his glory in these last 2 years, and his dissatisfaction had accumulated too much. Of course, it could also be because of the resentment he felt from Su Li's letter destroying the Myriad Willows garden. This expert from the emotion-severing sect had unhesitatingly issued a challenge to the Mount Li Sword sect. His challenge of Liang Banhu seemed to be a very casual choice, but many people were well aware that this was a choice that had been made after deep and careful consideration, and it even seemed somewhat sinister. Liang Banhu was Liang Xiaoxiao's blood brother, and now the entire continent knew that Liang Xiaoxiao had once colluded with the demons, vainly attempting to murder his fellow disciples, as well as Chun Changsheng and the others in the Garden of Zhou. After his plan failed, he had ruthlessly committed suicide, intending to frame Chun Changsheng. This emotion-severing sect expert had naturally chosen Liang Banhu as his opponent to make a fuss in this aspect. As expected, Liang Banhu had just walked onto the stage when this person spoke in a cold voice. "You might be Liang Xiaoxiao's blood-related brother, but I won't put his crimes on your head. However, I won't allow you to have the chance to obtain this celestial stone." Hearing these words, the stage became extremely quiet. Everyone knew that this emotion-severing sect expert was only intentionally finding a reason. In reality, he wanted to shake Liang Banhu's will to fight. However, neither the Mount Li Sword sect nor the Holy Maiden Peak lineage, which shared the same voice and spirit, could give much of a response to these words. Liang Xiaoxiao and Liang Banhu were both descendants of the Liang household, and the role that the Liang household played in this period of history was far too complicated. If Liang Banhu was like Liang Xiaoxiao, unable to forget his origins in the household and unable to maintain his identity as a disciple of the Mount Li Sword sect, then him obtaining the Heaven Stone was something that many factions did not wish to see. Guan Feibai's face was covered in a layer of frost, his gaze brimming with killing intent as he stared at the emotion-severing sect expert. But in the end, he did not move. Go Hanqi's expression did not change as he calmly gazed at Liang Banhu's figure. He had great confidence in his junior brother. In the silence, before the battle had even begun, a voice first rang out. The speaker was Tang 36. He looked at the emotion-severing sect expert and said, "If you want to fight, then fight. Why speak so much nonsense?" The mood on the stage changed, and the expression of the emotion-severing sect expert subtly changed. To everyone's surprise, this was not the end. Soon after, everyone heard Tang 36's next words. "Just like that old ancestor of yours. In the end, wasn't he still beaten into an idiot?" The sect master of the emotion-severing sect, the master of Hanqiu City, and the soul of the Tianliang Zhu clan were all one person, the old ancestor of many people, including the emotion-severing sect expert. This old ancestor was one of the storms of the 8 directions, the solitary drunk under the moon, Zhu Luo. Tang 36's words were very impudent, very offensive, very unyielding, but if one carefully thought about them, they were not wrong. Whether it was in the rain in Xuanyang City or the spring breeze in the Myriad Willows garden, Zhu Luo had been defeated miserably. He had been chopped into an idiot by Su Li's letter. His words had greatly boosted the Mount Li Sword sect's prestige. Guan Feibai gazed in the direction of the Orthodox Academy, thinking to himself, "Why has this fellow's personality changed today? If we meet in a little while, then I'll make him cough up less blood." The expression of the emotion-severing sect expert suddenly changed. He looked at Tang 36 and coldly said, "In a little while, I will definitely challenge you." Tang 36 shook his head and said, "You won't have the chance." The scene was in an uproar. Everyone was thinking, Why would he have such confidence in Liang Banhu? But no one noticed that he had moved closer to Chun Changsheng's side. Using a voice that only the two of them could hear, he asked in a low voice, "From your perspective, between Liang Banhu and this idiot, who is stronger?" Qin Changsheng asked, "Why do you seem so worried right now?" Tang 36 said, "I feel that, in order to vent your anger, I've cursed Zhu Luo to this extent. In a little while, that guy will definitely fight me to the death, so it's best not to touch him." Qin Changsheng looked at Liang Banhu's figure and said, "There's no need to worry. You're right, that person won't have the chance." He and Go Hanshi were both well-versed in the Taoist canon, rarely seen in the world. Amongst their peers, their eyesight was naturally extremely good. Go Hanshi had never been worried about Liang Banhu. Qin Changsheng also thought this way. Liang Banhu and Liang Xiaoxiao were different. Liang Xiaoxiao was a pine tree in a dark stream. Liang Banhu was a blade of grass on a sunny slope. Liang Banhu had a very wooden personality. He didn't say much, and even the expression on his face rarely changed. Of the divine state's 7 laws, he had always been the least famous. But this did not mean that he was the weakest. Moreover, there were no weaklings among the divine state's 7 laws. Liang Banhu unsheathed the sword at his waist and looked at the emotion-severing sect expert. He said one word, "Please." The emotion-severing sect expert slightly raised his eyebrows, preparing to say something more. However, Liang Banhu did not give him another chance to speak. A plume of dust abruptly appeared on the tranquil stone plateau. Like a dragon of dust, it charged forward with incredible speed. A simple and vigorous chi, like that of yellow earth, appeared in the perception of the crowd. The nearby lake seemed to sense some sort of pressure and began to ripple slightly. No one blinked. No one had the time to blink. The plume of dust surged, and the yellow dragon arrived. Liang Banhu arrived in front of the emotion-severing sect expert. The emotion-severing sect expert's pupils constricted. He felt an extremely intense sense of danger. He had not thought that Liang Banhu's sword style would be so different from his personality. It was actually so violent and unyielding. How could it break such a violent sword intent? There was only an even more violent sword intent. With a howl, the emotion-severing sect expert's sword pierced through the air, howling forward. Without the slightest intention of retreating, it directly stabbed towards Liang Banhu. Liang Banhu's expression did not change, as if he was still that farmer plowing the fields. He wielded his sword like it was a hoe, swinging it straight down. This attack seemed to be a very ordinary sword technique, and in reality, it was also a very ordinary sword technique. This attack was not fast, not even 1/5 the speed of the Heavenly Tao Academy's Sword of Hithering Light. This attack was not vicious, not even the slightest bit of chi from the Orthodox Academy's toppling mountain staff. This attack was not beautiful, not even having the right to be compared to the legendary departing spring of South Stream Temple. Compared to the countless exquisite sword styles of the Mount Li sword sect, Liang Banhu's attack had absolutely nothing worth mentioning. But this attack was very steady. Whether it was the hand gripping the sword or the sword technique itself, they were all very steady. It was like an unmoving cliff, like a mountain path. The reason this attack could be so steady was because this sword style was the foundation of the countless sword styles of the Mount Li sword sect. Mountain Gate Sword. Shishio gazed at the sword glows that were not particularly dazzling, but a light flashed through his eyes, which then began to blaze. Chapter 588. Yes, the sword style that Liang Banhu used was the most ordinary Mountain Gate sword of the Mount Li sword sect. Any disciple that entered the Mount Li sword sect had to learn this sword style in their first year. Qin Changsheng had learned this sword style before, so he naturally recognized it. But it wasn't until he saw Liang Banhu's sword move that he understood that Mount Li was indeed worthy of being called the sect of 10,000 swords. Even the most basic of sword styles had their own essence that couldn't be ignored. Within Liang Banhu's sword move, Qin Changsheng could see the concept of the stupid sword. Liang Banhu's metal sword clashed with the sword of the emotion-severing sect expert. A muffled sound. When fierce sword intents clashed, who was stronger? Naturally, the more stable sword intent was stronger. The hillside facing the sun was covered in perfectly straight ridges, without the slightest deviation. Liang Ban, whose metal sword clashed with the sword of the emotion-severing sect expert, but the next sword followed closely behind. His hand that gripped the sword was too stable, his sword too stable, to the point that the changes between sword moves seemed to be without the slightest delay. 10 odd sword cries resounded over the summit of Mount Han. In just a few moments, Liang Ban, who, and the emotion-severing sect expert, had already exchanged several moves. The metal sword was as stable as before, and it continued to advance. It was like walking through the ridges of the fields, but in reality, it was even more like climbing the steep peaks of Mount Li. It did not walk fast, but its footsteps were extremely stable, so one day, it would reach the highest point. The dust on the stone platform pervaded the air, sword glows appearing and disappearing. Suddenly, with a clear cry, Liang Ban, who withdrew his sword and lightly retreated several zhang, his feet landing on the ground. His hand, gripping the metal sword, was still stable, his expression still calm, just like a farmer that had just finished plowing for the day. The emotion-severing sect expert somewhat disbelievingly looked at his chest. At some unknown time, a wound had appeared there. The wound was not deep and did not bleed too much, but it was very straight, looking like it had been drawn on. Victory and defeat in this battle had already been decided. Many people had thought that Liang Ban who might win. Although he was the least famous of the Divine State's 7 laws, he was still one of the Divine State's 7 laws. But no one could have imagined that he would win so easily, or more accurately, that he would win so steadily. Only by completely grasping the situation could one not give the opponent any chance. Could one be like plowing a field or climbing a mountain? Could one give off such a steady and natural feeling? Even more shocking was that from start to finish, he had used the most ordinary sword style of Mount Li, the Mountain Gate sword. Admit it, Liang Banhu sheathed his sword, clasped his hands, and bowed to the emotion-severing sect expert, then returned to the Mount Li sword sect group, his expression unchanged. But Zhixio's eyes were the sharpest. He noticed that when he sheathed his sword, his sleeve was slightly trembling. In the face of a powerful enemy, his hand that held the sword was so steady. Now that he had won, why was his hand trembling? Naturally, it wasn't nervousness or uneasiness, but a faint excitement. In other words, it was the joy of venting the stuffiness in one's chest. The injured emotion-severing sect expert was helped back to receive treatment from the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets. A wandering cultivator from the northwest, seeing his pale face and dejected appearance, slightly frowned and turned in the direction of the Mount Li sword sect. Tianliang County was in the northwest. Other than the Snow Mountain sect, all the sects and vagrant cultivators within tens of thousands of kilometers were inextricably linked to the emotion-severing sect or the Zhu clan. In other words, they all worshipped Zhu Luo as a god. It was obvious that this wandering cultivator would issue a challenge to the Mount Li sword sect. The Mount Li sword sect had not given him this chance. Guan Feibai walked onto the field and impassively said to the wandering cultivator, "Come. Since I know that you want to challenge me, it's better to be straightforward and let me challenge you." The Mount Li sword sect was not an inflexible sect with a unified style, but Guan Feibai's style truly was the most prominent in the Mount Li sword sect. This style was direct, fierce, unyielding, and arrogant. It had originated from Su Li and had been around for several hundred years. Guan Feibai's cold voice caused the area around the stone platform to grow even quieter. The wandering cultivator from the northwest had a rather unsightly complexion, but in the end he could no longer remain where he was and slowly walked out. Guan Feibai held his sword horizontally in front of his eyes, his expression indifferent and saying nothing. The wandering cultivator from the northwest slowly unsheathed his sword, his expression solemn. His sleeves drifted in the wind as his chi began to rise. A clear howl. Guan Feibai rushed forward, his unsheathed sword appearing in the wind as he slashed at the wandering cultivator from the northwest. The dust that was slowly settling on the stone platform once more began to pervade the air, and the lake water shook even more violently. Swish, 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 swish. For extremely clear sounds of swords piercing through flesh resounded as four sword glows cleaved apart the wind and water. The wandering cultivator grunted and retreated again and again, but he was simply incapable of blocking Guan Feibai's sword. Several bloody wounds appeared on his chest. "Enough, go Hanshi said." His voice was very soft, but everyone around the stone platform could hear it clearly. Guan Feibai's sword energy was in the midst of a frenzy, but when he heard his senior brother's words, he forced himself to stop. With a cracking sound, several fine cracks appeared on the bluestone under his feet. The wandering cultivator had never imagined that he could stop at a word, and he really could stop at a word. He could no longer use his defensive sword technique, and his true essence was being reversed, so how could he stop? Like a drunkard, he constantly retreated, his steps becoming more and more disorderly. In the end, he failed to stand firm and fell on his butt, cutting a particularly sorry figure. At this time, Guan Feibai had already sheathed his sword and turned around, walking back to the Mount Li sword sect. That northwest wandering cultivator looked at his back, his face pale to the extreme, full of shame and pain. His mind was agitated, and coupled with his internal injuries acting up, he finally couldn't hold back and spat out a mouthful of blood. The stone platform by the lake was still quiet, even quieter than before, like a deathly stillness. Tang 36 said nothing, and for once he did not mock Guan Feibai. The crowd was stunned by Guan Feibai's cultivation in the sword and his lethality. They were also speechless, but they did not notice a detail in this battle that had passed in the blink of an eye. Zhishou noticed, and with a slightly stern expression, he said, "He's still using the Mountain Gate sword." At this moment, a furious rebuke came from the stone platform. "Your Mount Li sword sect is truly going too far." Everyone could clearly see the current situation. This was a battle between the Mount Li sword sect and Tianliang County. The relationship between the Mount Li sword sect and the cultivators of Tianliang County was very complicated. Because Su Li had once killed half of the Liang household because of Liang Xiaoxiao and Liang Banhe's identities and what had happened to them, because of that night rain in Xuanyang City last year, and because of that letter that had burned the Myriad Willows garden into scorched earth this year. The two sides had already formed a deep grudge that could not be resolved. At a time like this, the person who still wanted to seek justice for the cultivators of Tianliang County naturally also came from Tianliang County. Scholar who was an expert of Hanqiu City. Many years ago, this person's talent in cultivation had obtained the joint recognition of the Great Zhou Imperial Court and the Pavilion of Heavenly Secrets. Everyone was very sure that as long as he succeeded in entering star condensation, he would assuredly be able to enter the proclamation of liberation. In the north, he even had the reputation of being invincible in the ethereal opening realm. Now that Liang Banhu and Guan Feibai had both moved, he naturally had to challenge Go Hanshi. The mood instantly became rather tense. Go Hanshi had been well-versed in the Taoist canon since he was a child. In terms of intelligence, willpower, and comprehension, he was one of the best. If not for Qiu Shanjun in Mount Li, and Su Yorong and Chun Changxing outside Mount Li, he would assuredly be the most suitable leader of the human world's younger generation. Although a scholar whose reputation was not as resounding as his, he had cultivated for many more years than Chun Changxing. In both cultivation and experience, he was superior. For these two experts to exchange blows in the Boiling Stone Summit, one could imagine just what sort of intense and marvelous battle would ensue. Go Hanshi walked onto the stage and nodded at Scholar Hu, but he did not speak. Scholar Hu said that the Mount Li sword sect was bullying others too much. He did not reply, did not argue, because although he was skilled in this path, he was not willing to do so. But in the eyes of everyone else, was this sort of calmness and silence not a form of disregard and humiliation? Scholar Hu expressionlessly asked, "Do you not have anything you want to say?" Go Hanshi shook his head. He had nothing he wanted to say. Starting from that storm in Xuanyang City to that emotion-severing sect expert mentioning Liang Xiao, it was foreordained that there would be a battle today. The mountain gate of Mount Li was a real gate. Upon opening this gate, one could see Mount Li. The people of the Mount Li sword sect all had different personalities, but they all liked to get straight to the point. Go Hanshi was a gentle person, but he was no exception. He unsheathed his sword and thrust forward. It was only one strike. Scholar who had lost. A crushing defeat. This strike was called straight to the point. The first move of the Mount Li sword sect's Mountain Gate sword. The lakeshore was quiet. The gazes of the crowd constantly shifted between the unconscious and injured scholar Hu and the returning Go Hanshi. They were shocked, speechless, gradually becoming perplexed. Qin Changshan was also somewhat perplexed, but it was not because Go Hanshi had so easily defeated his opponent. He had always admired, even admired, Go Hanshi. He had always believed that the reason he had been able to defeat Go Hanshi in the grand examination was not because he was stronger than Go Hanshi, but because he had more reasons than Go Hanshi to take first place of the first banner in the grand examination. He had no longing for this world. That scholar who had been praised in the north as invincible in the ethereal opening realm. But so what? If he could defeat a cultivator at the initial stage of star condensation, then Go Hanshi could too. He didn't understand, and the reason for his uneasiness was that from Liang Ban, who to Guan Fei by to Go Hanshi, they all used the Mountain Gate sword of Mount Li sword sect. This could be understood as the confidence of the disciples of Mount Li and the pride of the 7 rules of God. But he always felt that behind this choice, there should be some other meaning hidden. Because of Liang Xiao, Tang 36 looked at the location of the Mountain Li sword sect. His expression was not as carefree as usual, but rather serious. Qin Changshan didn't understand and asked Liang Xiao. Tang 36 took back his gaze and looked at him. Many people have forgotten who was the first place of the first banner in the grand examination before you. Qin Changshan remembered and said, it was Liang Xiao. That's right. Even among the 7 people, Liang Xiao's talent and strength were outstanding. Some people only know that Guan Fei Bai's perseverance was amazing when he studied sword arts, and that he practiced all the sword arts in the foundation method of Mount Li sword sect to the point of perfection. But they don't know that Liang Xiao is not weak. He even practiced the sword of Mount Li sword sect's sword of opening into a true killing technique. Tang 36 said, in the hearts of the disciples of Mount Li sword sect, the sword of opening is Liang Xiao's sword. They use his sword arts to fight, and the meaning they want to express is very clear. Zhixiu looked at the location of the Mountain Li sword sect. Deep in his eyes, a blood-red color gradually appeared. Qin Changshan thought and said, I don't think so. Chapter 589. Liang Xiao, a disciple of the Mount Li sword sect, was once one of the Divine Kingdom's 7 laws. Because of his hatred, this young genius, who should have had an infinitely bright future, ultimately embarked on the path of betraying humanity. He colluded with the demons, stirring up a storm of blood in the Garden of Zhou, and attempted to assassinate Qin Changshan, Qi Jian, and the others. Even after he failed, he was still unwilling to give up, using his own death as a sacrifice for the most unyielding method. But with Su Li's return to Mount Li, the end of Mount Li's internal strife, Qin Changshan's return to the capital, and Zhuang Huanyu's suicide to escape punishment, all debate and suspicion came to a screeching halt. Henceforth, Liang Xiao became Mount Li's greatest humiliation, or perhaps it could be said that the place where he was most vulnerable to attack. That expert from the emotion-severing sect had done exactly this. The Mount Li sword sect's response was unyielding and clear. According to the rules of the Mount Li sword sect, even though Liang Xiao had died, he was still expelled from the sect and was no longer viewed as a disciple of Mount Li. However, in the eyes of Go Hanshi and the others, that once talented young swordsman was still a fellow disciple, not to mention that Liang Banhu had always been his blood brother. Hatred and shame were just one aspect. After cultivating together for 10 whole years, how could they forget so quickly? Tang 36 asked in confusion. Do you really think that they're not targeting you? Liang Xiaoxiao had died outside the Garden of Zhou in Hanqiu City, committing suicide. But if one looked at it from another perspective, was it not the same as dying under Chun Chongqing's sword? Just like when Zhuang Huanyu committed suicide by the well of the Heavenly Academy, the teachers and students of the Heavenly Academy, including the famous Guanbai, would still blame this on Chun Chongqing. No one said that Chun Chongqing had done anything wrong in this matter, but just like what was said before, gratitude and grudges were always clear and unreasonable. Tang 36 had thought of this and reminded Chun Chongqing. Chun Chongqing shook his head and said, maybe it's just a memento. Tang 36 raised his eyebrows slightly. He didn't really believe this explanation. Zhixiu said, what Chun Chongqing meant was that if you died, no matter how you died, he would never forget you. Occasionally, he would use the 3 swords of Wenshui to reminisce. Tang 36 glared at him and said, when did you become so talkative? Tianyang County had an old grudge with the Mount Li sword sect, which was why Scholar Hu and the others had challenged them. But they had lost 3 times in a row. The cultivators from other places naturally would not seek trouble, and the scene became rather cold and cheerless. Then, Zhong Hui stepped forward. This was a matter of course, so much so that when the spectators saw him walk onto the field and look at Gohan Shi, they subconsciously let out a sigh of relief. In last year's grand examination, Chun Chongqing was first upon the first banner, with Gohan Shi second and Zhong Hui third. In the newly announced proclamation of Golden Distinction, Zhong Hui was still closely behind these two. In the 1.5 years after the end of the grand examination, Zhong Hui's progress was godly, and he had already cultivated to the peak of ethereal opening. Compared to his somewhat lucky 3rd place upon the first banner, his position on the proclamation of Golden Distinction was a true reflection of his current status amongst the younger generation of cultivators. But he was still below Chun Chongqing and Gohan Shi. So he naturally had to challenge Gohan Shi in the Boiling Stone Summit, and then Chun Chongqing. He calmly looked at Gohan Shi, his peripheral vision falling upon Chun Chongqing. This sort of calmness represented confidence. Guan Feibai was also very confident, and, at the same time, very proud. He had always looked down upon Zhong Hui, and felt that this scholar from Scholartree Manor was feigning calmness. He coldly laughed a few times, and prepared to enter the field to meet his opponent. Gohan Shi stopped his junior brother. Zhong Hui did not speak, but everyone knew that the target of his challenge was Gohan Shi. He wanted to give his opponent sufficient respect. The lake breeze lightly blew upon Zhong Hui's sleeves and upon the fine sand on the stone plateau. Gohan Shi walked on the surface of the fine sand, leaving behind shallow footprints. Zhong Hui looked at him, his expression calm, even somewhat wooden, as he unsheathed his sword from its sheath. Following his movements, his sleeves instantly calmed down, because the wind blowing from the surface of the lake had stopped, chopped into pieces by the sword intent he emitted, vanishing into the air. Gohan Shi slightly raised his eyebrows, somewhat surprised. Rumors and seeing with one's own eyes were ultimately different. Everyone said that Zhong Hui had already cultivated to the peak of ethereal opening, and that he might even become the second extraordinary individual after Qiushan Jun to succeed in star condensation. But only by personally seeing and feeling the lake breeze that had passed away could people be certain that his sword intent was already so powerful, only a step away from that threshold. Gohan Shi's expression grew solemn. The mood on the platform also grew solemn. However, unlike what people imagined, Gohan Shi's solemnity was not because he had realized that he might lose, but because he thought that he could no longer conceal his strength. Without thinking for too long, he made his decision. An indistinct, extremely light chi began to emanate from his body. The lake breeze that had drifted through the air seemed to be summoned by some sort of energy. Slowly but clearly, it began to take form once more, leisurely drifting around him. At this moment, the blazing sun was high in the sky. Although this was the summit of a high and cold mountain, the temperature had gradually warmed. The blazing rays of light fell upon the surface of the lake, and those stones, refracting and scattering, somewhat dazzling. Those bright rays of light were not able to directly fall upon Go-Hanshir's body, because wisps of the lake breeze drifted around his body. The rays of light refracted and scattered once more, still bright, but no longer so dazzling. Moreover, they were cut into countless specks of light by the lake breeze, reflecting on his blue robes like the scenery of a forest, but also like countless stars. That indistinct chi suddenly became incomparably calm, incomparably clear. Countless specks of starlight danced in the space between his eyebrows and his robes, but they did not go far. The stone platform by the lake was deathly still. For a very long time, no one opened their mouth to speak. Just when those specks of starlight began to dance, Zhong Hui's expression changed. His calm, even somewhat wooden expression was instantly replaced by shock and defeat. His face became very pale, without a trace of blood. After some time, he finally awoke and said in a trembling voice, "I lost." As he said these 3 words, he seemed to be in great pain. After saying this, he seemed much more relaxed. Sheathing his sword, he turned and left. The stone platform by the lake was still quiet. A clear and gentle voice rose up. "Congratulations, senior brother." The speaker was Su Yurong. Many people had already guessed or understood why Zhong Hui had conceded, but only when she said these words did they dare to believe it, because it truly was rather inconceivable. The entire crowd was silent. The silence had already persisted for a very long time. Go-Hanshir had already succeeded in star condensation. His expression was very calm. The disciples of the Lishan sword sect could not conceal their pride. Guan Fei Bai still had that deadpan face, but his gaze toward the people of the Orthodox Academy was clearly somewhat different. Chun Changsheng said emotionally, "Admirable." Zhe Xiu said, "Second fastest." Amongst the younger generation, Go-Hanshir could be ranked second in terms of speed in star condensation. Mou and Tian Haisheng Shui were both slightly older than him when they succeeded in star condensation. As for the person ranked first, it was obviously Qiushan, Juntang 36, expressionless, said in a low voice, "You have to hurry." This sentence was naturally said to Chun Changsheng. Gohan looked towards the people of the Orthodox Academy, looked at Chun Changsheng, and slowly nodded. He did not speak, but Chun Changsheng understood his meaning. Chun Changsheng was silent for a while, then stood up. The crowd was in an uproar. Chapter 590. The uproar was the amalgamation of many voices. The sound of discussion, the sound of sighs. The relationship between the Mount Li sword sect and the Orthodox Academy was no longer that initial enmity. It was just as Go-Hanshi had told his junior brothers before coming to Mount Han. They were not enemies, but they were still opponents. Even if there was no enmity, they would still meet again. The Mount Li sword sect had easily repelled the hostile experts of Tianliang County. Go-Hanshi had displayed his star condensation cultivation and, without a word, had forced back scholarly manners Zhong Hui. With the situation developing to this point, it was very natural for him and Chun Changsheng to meet. Almost 2 years had passed since the final match of the grand examination. Many things had happened in these 2 years, so would the result of this battle have changed? In the world, only Chun Changsheng and Go-Hanshi were well-versed in the Taoist canon. They possessed a cultivation level and talent that were difficult for their peers to reach. Everyone wanted to know just which one of them was stronger. Go-Hanshi had already succeeded in star condensation, but Chun Changsheng had not. Logically speaking, he should not be Go-Hanshi's match, but everyone knew that those events that had occurred in front of the Orthodox Academy last summer, surpassing cultivation levels to defeat star condensation cultivators that were unimaginable to ordinary cultivators, was not too difficult for him. But they could not completely favor Chun Changsheng, because although Go-Hanshi had not been at star condensation for very long, he was Go-Hanshi. Just this name alone was enough to confirm that he was no ordinary initial-level star condensation cultivator. Chun Changsheng stood up and walked towards the stone platform, countless gazes following him. Go-Hanshi was also looking at him, very calm, very serious. Just at this moment, a clear sound suddenly came from the pavilion by the lake. This clear sound came from the zither strings, gurgling like water. Soon after, a second sound came from the zither, and then it did not stop. This was an extremely elegant piece of music. It was obvious that the person playing the zither was extremely well-versed in the study of music. The light strokes of his fingers were extremely infectious, but for some reason, at the turning points of the zither, a few mistakes that even beginners would not make appeared, obvious pauses and interruptions. Who's playing the zither? Many people looked towards the small pavilion from which the zither music originated and thought of this question, and some people even added a few more words to the question. Who would dare to play the zither at this time? The door of the small building was closed. Someone remembered that the door of the small building had not been opened since a few days ago, so there was actually someone inside. The elder of heavenly secrets gazed at the small building and shook his head. He naturally knew who the person in the building was, but he did not expect that the other party would not listen to his advice and still insist on fighting. Looks like our match can only be saved for the future, Gohan sure said as he looked at Chun Changsheng, who was on the stage. At this time, he had already recognized the person who was playing the zither. Chun Changsheng also heard it and said, "I hope it won't be too long." There were still many people who could hear the sound of the zither. The sounds of discussion gradually rose and then subsided. Countless gazes were cast on the small building, faintly tinged with excitement. The zither player was Guanbai, the true leader of the Heavenly Tao Academy's younger generation, famous name Guanbai. Gohan sure indeed wanted to spar with Chun Changsheng, but upon hearing the zither music, he had no choice but to concede. Everyone present was indeed looking forward to seeing the contest between Gohan Sure and Chun Changsheng, but they wanted to see the contest between Chun Changsheng and Guan by even more. This was because the people of the continent had already waited an entire year for this contest. Last summer, the gate of the Orthodox Academy was incomparably lively. Guanbai did not appear, only standing on the side of the street, and quietly glancing at Chun Changsheng. He did not say anything, but many people in the capital knew. He had given Chun Changsheng a year to mature. After that, no trace of Guanbai was seen. This expert of the path of the sword from the Heavenly Tao Academy seemed to have vanished. It now seemed that Guanbai had probably secluded himself in cultivation, all for the sake of preparing for today's match. With a creak, the door to the distant small building was slowly pushed open. A man walked out from the small building, his posture tall and straight, his expression serene and calm, not a speck of dust on his hair. He was Guanbai, but he was very different from the Guanbai of the past, and also very different from the impression of those who knew Guanbai had a Guanbai. The Guanbai of the past had always been on the road, his body covered in dust, his edge threatening. Anyone who saw Guanbai would feel a sword glow light up in their eyes, and would even feel the sword intent exuding from his body assault them to the point of tears of pain. The current Guanbai was still like that long sword hanging at his waist, quietly resting in its sheath, not revealing the slightest edge. The noon sun shone upon the stone platform by the lake, blazing hot and exceptionally bright. Guanbai slowly walked over. There was silence. Several hundred gazes followed his body as he moved. The crowd gradually parted, opening a path for him. Suddenly, there was a slight disturbance in the crowd, and then cries of alarm gradually rose up. It was unknown what they had seen, but they seemed particularly shocked. Tang 36 stood up and gazed in that direction, his expression instantly turning serious. Chun Changsheng had already seen it, and his expression was very solemn. The lake breeze lightly blew, and his sleeves lightly fluttered. Guanbai's sleeves lightly fluttered, occasionally being rolled up. His right arm had actually been severed. An uproar, a true uproar. Cries of alarm rang out incessantly. Everyone believed that in this year, Guanbai would continue his journey, perhaps conceal his identity and go to the northern battlefield to kill enemies, or perhaps cultivate and prepare for battle. Who could have expected that when he once more appeared in front of the world, he would be missing an arm? Even more shocking was that it was his right arm that had been severed. In the view of many people, Guanbai was the genius of the sword most likely to enter the top 10 of the Proclamation of Liberation. He was much younger than Wang Po's generation. Now, he didn't even have the right hand to hold his sword, Would the once genius of the sword really fall into the mundane world? Under shocked gazes, Guanbai arrived. After bowing to the elder of heavenly secrets and Su Yurong, he very naturally walked up to the platform where the orthodoxy was. No matter what, he was still a person of the Heavenly Tao Academy, a person of the orthodoxy. He bowed to Ling Haizhuang and Mao Qiuyu. It was obvious that Ling Haizhuang and Mao Qiuyu knew about his severed arm. Ling Haizhuang replied, "Just do your best." As the previous principal of the Heavenly Tao Academy, Mao Qiuyu's emotions were naturally much more complex. He looked at Guanbai, wanting to say something, but then hesitating. In the end, he only sighed and said, "It's coming." Guanbai replied, "It had to come in the end." Then he turned to Chen Changsheng and very calmly and solemnly bowed. Chen Changsheng did not dodge. He accepted his bow and then returned it. Guanbai calmly gazed at him. He also did not dodge, accepting this bow. A faintly discernible light appeared in his eyes, bright and somber, like the autumn sun high in the sky. "Everyone is waiting. Come," he said to Chen Changsheng. After saying this, the sword light disappeared into the depths of his eyes and could no longer be seen. Chen Changsheng looked at his empty sleeve and said, "I don't think it's appropriate." Guanbai replied, "In this year, no more miracles have occurred on your body, and I've also learned to use my left hand in the sword. It's very fair, perfect for me to give it my all." Chen Changsheng fell silent, then asked, "Why can't you let go?" "No one has let go of their hand as thoroughly as I have," Guanbai said with a smile. His hand was already gone, so what need was there to let go? It was just that there were some things that could not be let go. His smile gradually faded as he calmly said to Chen Changsheng, "No matter how unbearable Huan Yu is, he's still my junior brother. Yes, there were many things that could not be let go. Although Liang Xiaoxiao had colluded with the demons, his crimes unpardonable, Go Hanshi and the other disciples of the Mountly Sword sect would still miss him. Just like Zhixio had said, if Tang 36 really did something that angered both men and gods, Chen Changsheng would still find it impossible to loathe him. Grudges had always been unresolvable and incomprehensible. The matter is pretty much done, but it seems like my laziness has returned. I'll do my best to recover as soon as possible. Chapter 591. Guanbai had given his opinion, and now it was up to Chen Changsheng whether or not he would accept it. To him, this truly was a rather troublesome problem. In the view of many people, at least today, he should not have taken action. Guanbai was not one of those ordinary initial-level star condensation cultivators who had once lost to his sword, but a true expert of the sword, his cultivation far above Chen Changsheng's. More importantly, Guanbai had for some reason been heavily injured, his right arm severed. Even if he did, as he said, and mastered the sword with his left hand in this year, it was still impossible for him to recover his peak strength. Even if Chen Changsheng used all his strength to defeat his opponent, it would not bring him any glory. He was the future pope. If he won, he would only provoke criticism, but if he lost, it would be extremely humiliating. The best method was to not accept his opponent's challenge. It was very quiet. Everyone was looking at Chen Changsheng, waiting for his decision. No one dared to urge him, but the silence and those gazes were also an invisible pressure. Just at this moment, a clear and cold voice rose up from behind the layers of white gauze. "The road is long and arduous, but since you've already begun, how can you stop? As long as you continue to walk, there will always be a day when you reach it. There's no need to care about whether it's sooner or later, much less about victory or defeat. What need is there for your heart to be disturbed by the slander of the world? Could it be that you still can't see this clearly?" The number of people in the world that could speak to Chen Changsheng in this tone did not exceed 10. Of the people present, only the elder of heavenly secrets and Su Yurong had the right. The speaker was Su Yurong. Her voice could be described as clear and cold, but it could also be described as apathetic. There was not much clear emotion in it. Many people followed the voice to the high platform behind the layers of white gauze, gazing at that faintly discernible, beautiful figure. A strange emotion arose in their hearts, because the atmosphere had become rather strange. Su Yurong's words seemed to be encouragement, But if understood from another perspective, they were more like goading, even taunting. When the crowd thought of this, they couldn't help but sigh. They thought, even a holy maiden with a brightly lit Tao heart would still be somewhat resentful at the humiliation of having her engagement annulled in the capital. When the people of the Mount Lee Sword sect heard these words, they began to have other thoughts. Guan Feibai looked at Go Hanshi and said somewhat uncertainly, from junior sister's reaction, eldest brother should still have a chance? Go Hanshi was well-versed in the Taoist canon, but he really did not understand these matters. At this moment, the only person present who truly understood the truth of the matter was Tang 36. He looked at the expressions on the faces of the crowd and the movements on the side of the Mount Lee Sword sect. His lips curled into a cold smile, tinged with ridicule, as he thought, how could you people understand the affections of this young couple and their display of affection? People thought Su Yu Rong's words were meant to mock Chen Changsheng. Tang 36 knew it wasn't, and Chen Changsheng knew even more that it wasn't. He understood what she meant. Cultivation required continuous tempering, and progress required continuous challenges. Victory and defeat were not important, and slander was even more insignificant. If he wanted to break through, he needed to learn to ignore all of this and return to the essence of cultivation. Through life's comprehension, through battle to obtain perception beyond the normal value, through the greatest pressure between life and death to obtain powerful spiritual power. He did not look at her behind the white veil, but at the hot mist in the depths of the lake. Finally, he withdrew his gaze and looked at Guanbai. The lake breeze blew gently, blowing up the dust between the stone slabs, the light sleeves that had lost their substance, as well as his sleeves. He walked to the center of the field and arrived in front of Guanbai. This was the first time many people had seen him up close. They discovered that the legendary Chen Changsheng was not particularly handsome, but his brows were extremely clean, even carrying a hint of youth. He stood there, like a fresh and clean spring breeze, possessing an aura of detachment from the mortal world. The crowd began to sigh with emotion, as well as praise. Guanbai was very calm, saying nothing more. He took the long sword from his waist, grasped it in his hand, and raised it in front of him. He only had one hand left, so how could he draw the sword? His hand slowly moved up, arriving at the hilt. His knuckles slightly tightened as he tightened his grip. With a pleasant grinding sound, the sheath slowly slid down, revealing the bright blade. This scene was very beautiful. It was like several dozen mu of moss on the surface of a lake being slowly swept up by a great gale and then carried away. It was more like a general who had fought a bloody battle on the yellow sands, slowly but firmly taking off the armor on his body, revealing a body brimming with strength. This was armor stripping. Armor stripping did not always mean returning to the fields. It could also be the beginning of a grand battle. Or it could be said that this was a battle that returned to its essence, even carrying a childish and clumsy intent. This battle was not influenced by any external factors, was not entangled by the interests of factions, had no bargaining chips or gambling stakes. It was just a simple battle. It was a competition of strength, a struggle for victory and defeat, a battle to one's heart's content. It was just a simple sight of his sword unsheathing, but Guanbai had completely revealed his intentions and fighting spirit. Many people's eyes lit up, especially cultivators like Guan Feibai, who did not like this sort of battle. Even Tang 36 felt his body heat up. He subconsciously walked over to the battlefield, arriving at the side of the Mount Lee Sword sect, wanting to get a little closer to this battle. Only Zhixio had no reaction. His expression remained indifferent, unable to arouse any interest. Unlike what the common people imagined, he actually did not like fighting. In his view, the goal of fighting was to kill the enemy. Victory and defeat, such matters as satisfaction, were truly too excessive. In the next moment, the fighting spirit that had just been stirred up in the crowd rapidly vanished. The light in the eyes of Guan Feibai and the others instantly vanished, replaced by astonishment or defeat, because a sword intent had appeared at the peak of Mount Han. This sword intent came from the sword in Guan Bai's hand, from his brow and eyes, from his tightly bound black hair, from his empty sleeve, from every part of his body. This sword intent was incomparably awe-inspiring, incomparably sharp. The gravel and grass that Liang Banhu and Guan Fei Bai's swords had previously chopped into even finer granules. The lake water and wind that had once been severed and then restored were severed once more. Countless cracks appeared on them, and for a moment they could not be restored. The scene was rather mystical. Such a powerful sword intent. Even the proud and confident Guan Fei Bai and Tang 36 were forced to admit that they were no match for this sword intent. The crowd cried out in alarm, and then quickly grew even quieter. Everyone's gazes fell on Guan Bai's body, their eyes brimming with shock and reverence. He was truly worthy of being an expert of the proclamation of liberation, a famous figure of the Heavenly Tao Academy. Guan Bai had lost an arm, and his strength had been severely damaged. But not only had his cultivation not dropped, his comprehension of the path of the sword had even advanced. Just like what Su Yurong had said to Chen Changsheng earlier, opportunities often came from setbacks. Breakthroughs often originated from trials between life and death. Last year in the capital, because of the miserable encounter of the wild dog in the alley, Guan Bai was not willing to let the old Taoist nun leave, and then he suffered the greatest humiliation and blow of his life. He left the capital and secluded himself in a remote mountain village. He used half a year to recover from the wound of his severed arm, and then he began to quietly comprehend. By the stream at the base of the cliff, by the pond behind the farmhouse, he calmly and seriously pondered for a very long time. He confirmed that he had not done anything wrong that night, let alone the fact that he was already an expert of the proclamation of liberation. Even if he was still that 5 or 6-year-old child who could not cultivate, he would still have stood up, because this matter was right, was something that he should have done, so why bother with it? Why care who that old Taoist nun was? Why regret? No, there was no regret. Guan Bai did not know that many years ago, in the wilderness of Tianliang County, a person called Wang Pa had once thought about this problem by the stream and pond. After Wang Pa thought through this problem, he finally obtained his own path of the blade. Although this path of the blade was still far from being as powerful and terrifying as Zhou Dufu's path of the blade, in terms of cultivation, it was already qualified to be discussed in the same breath. This path of the blade was called straight. After Guan Bai thought through this problem, he also obtained his own path of the sword, which was also called straight. On that day, the mountain was covered with maple leaves, the cicadas by the pond were silent in winter. His path of the sword was complete. Chen Changsheng sensed Guan Bai's sword intent and felt admiration. He viewed Wang Pa as his idol, so how could he not like this sort of sword intent? Moreover, he faintly knew what Guan Bai had encountered in the capital. He greatly admired his opponent for being able to recover from the severe injury of his severed arm in a short year, and for his cultivation of the path of the sword to even surpass it. He even more admired the reason for his injury. Such a person, such a sword intent, how could he repay him? Of course, it could only be straight. With a boom, the plain of snow in his body began to fiercely combust, transforming into countless strands of true essence that passed through those narrow meridians and was transported everywhere. His body dragged out a blur on the stone plateau, transforming into a straight line. He arrived in front of Guan Bai and stabbed out with his sword. This sword was incomparably straight. Chapter 592. The lake wind poured into the sleeve of his Taoist robe, causing it to flap like a great banner. The stainless dagger flew through the air as if it was about to ignite. Out of respect, and also because of his strength, Chen Changsheng did not hold anything back. He attacked with his most powerful blazing sword, and the direction and angle chosen for this sword was naturally the intellectual sword. This sword seemed perfectly straight, but in reality, it was constantly changing its path. Guan Bai quietly stood at his original position. His sword had not moved, but his domain had already formed. With a rip, a small hole was torn in Chen Changsheng's sleeve. His sword had already arrived in front of Guan Bai. Back in the wilderness, Su Li had said that in the present world, there were very few perfect star domains. But the current situation was completely different from what he had said, because it was not Chun Chongqing's sword that had found a hole in Guan Bai's star domain, but Guan Bai who had taken the initiative to disperse his star domain. It was just like the decision Liang Wangsun had made in facing Chun Chongqing's sword in Xuanyang City. They were both experts on the proclamation of liberation, so their intelligence in dealing with situations was often interlinked. Although Guan Bai's cultivation in the path of the sword was high, he did not believe that he could definitely defeat Chun Chongqing, who had received Su Li's personal guidance on the path of the sword. If he could not obtain an absolute advantage in the subtlety of his swordsmanship, then rather than forming his star domain and passively waiting to be attacked, it was better to rely on the advantage of his cultivation to forcefully receive the attack. Just like that, Guan Bai's sword forcefully chopped down. He paid no attention to Chun Chongqing's sword. Because his cultivation level was far higher than Chun Chongqing's, he believed that his sword would assuredly be faster and heavier than Chun Chongqing's, so Chun Chongqing would assuredly have to draw back his sword to defend. No matter how high one's talent, no matter how exquisite one's swordsmanship, it was impossible to change this fact. Guan Bai's sword was like a waterfall descending from the sky, rumbling like thunder as it descended towards Chun Chongqing. He could only stop his advance and draw back his sword. A sword that could not return was forced to be drawn back. Whether it was the blazing sword or the intellectual sword, both had lost their meaning. The two most powerful sword techniques he had learned from Su Li had been so easily broken. Fortunately, Su Li had taught him 3 swords in total, and the third sword was most suited for defense. The stainless sword somewhat awkwardly returned to his side, somewhat clumsily raised to the sky to welcome the waterfall descending from the sky. The waterfall was on the mountain. No matter how hard the stone mountain was, it would be washed out by the waterfall into a deep pool. However, in the pool water, people would always see some stones covered in moss. Even after being washed by the water for 1,000 years, they still didn't move, persevering there. Just like the dagger in Chun Chongqing's hand. This was a sword that not even Su Li had learned. Guan Bai's sword energy surged forth like a tide, but it was unable to break through Chun Chongqing's defense. The sunlight that shone on the lakeside became a lot lighter in an instant. That was because countless golden stars exploded between their swords, as beautiful as a fiery tree. There was a loud bang. Chun Chongqing retreated a few dozen feet before he managed to stabilize his body with difficulty. His Taoist robe was torn, his leather boots shattered, and a clear mark appeared on the stone platform. Guan Bai did not give him any chance to catch his breath and followed his sword. He was using the Heavenly Academy's Sword of Hithering Light. In terms of speed alone, it could be said to be unparalleled. Countless sword lights illuminated everyone's eyes. It was like the surface of the lake under the setting sun was covered in innumerable golden lines. The clear cries of swords incessantly rang out, particularly concentrated, ultimately forming a straight line. It was dull and monotonous, yet it also made one's heart palpitate, like a flute playing the highest note. Guan Bai's powerful sword intent, accompanied by this clear cry, incessantly rose higher and higher. The sword glows on the stone platform became increasingly dazzling, making it impossible to look directly at them. The spectators grew more and more nervous. Guan Bai's cultivation in the path of the sword was too powerful. No matter how exquisite Chun Chongqing's sword style was, just how long could he last? Based on the current situation, this battle seemed to have already been decided. Su Yurong sat behind the curtain, the worry in the depths of her eyes, unseen by anyone. The nearby South Stream Temple disciples saw her tightly clench her hands and thought that she was excited that Chun Chongqing was about to be defeated by his opponent's sword and that her wish had been fulfilled. The array laid down by the pavilion of heavenly secrets had long since been activated. The stones by the lake shore began to exude countless powerful qis, the faintly discernible clear light separating the two on the field from the outside world. The sword cry that seemed like a straight line finally broke. This did not mean that Guan Bai could not maintain such a fierce attack, but rather that his sword intent had already been raised to its limit. He no longer needed to deliberately condense his sword energy, but rather became even more free and unrestrained. The sword intent grew increasingly awe-inspiring. Countless smooth cracks cut into the stone floor. Even the clear light enveloping the field seemed to be on the verge of being cut apart. Chen Changsheng and Guan Bai's movement techniques grew faster and faster, almost becoming two streams of light. They constantly spun around the field, making it very difficult to see them clearly. As for the specific sword techniques they were currently using, besides the Elder of Heavenly Secrets, Linghai Zhiwang, and a few others, no one else could understand them. After an unknown amount of time, the two figures finally separated. As the dust settled, the two calmly stared at each other, separated by Tensum Zhang. Guanbai was the same as before, without the slightest change. Chun Changsheng, on the other hand, was in a very miserable state. His Taoist robe had been cut into countless places, his face was pale, and the hand holding the stainless sword was faintly trembling. Everyone could see that he had suffered significant injuries and would soon be unable to hold on, but no one would look down on him or feel disappointed because of this. This was because the fact that he had been able to hold on for so long under Wan Bai's sword was already an extraordinary feat. It could not be forgotten that although he was the next pope, a genius that everyone had placed their hopes on, he was still a young man, not even 17. Countless gazes fell on Chun Changsheng's body, everyone waiting to hear him concede. Conceding defeat was not shameful. No one could always win. Even figures like Zhou Dufu and Su Li, when they were young, they also had to experience this sort of thing. However, in the next moment, Chun Changsheng said something that no one had expected. He looked at Guanbai and asked, "Could I trouble sir to wait a little longer?" Guanbai's expression was very calm, because he had already expected this. He had been waiting for Chun Changsheng the entire time, had already waited for a year, so why should he care about waiting a little longer? He sat down cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes. This was his answer to Chun Changsheng. Chun Changsheng looked at him and said with a sincere expression, "Thank you." After saying this, he also sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes to meditate. At this point in the sword battle, both sides suddenly sat down on the ground and began to meditate. This scene was truly rather strange. The crowd was very confused and gradually began to discuss with each other. Many people did not understand why Chun Changsheng wanted Guan Bai to wait a little longer. But some people faintly understood. Linghai Zhiwang's complexion became extremely unsightly. A gratified expression appeared on Mao Qiuyu's face. Go Hanshi was a little surprised at first, and then he silently smiled. But the Elder of Heavenly Secrets creased his brow. Chapter 593. A few days ago, on the island, the Elder of Heavenly Secrets had told Chun Changsheng that if he wanted to delay the eruption of his internal injuries, then he should not continue cultivating. He didn't expect that Chun Changsheng not only didn't listen to him, but also advanced even more fiercely. In such a short period of time, Chun Changsheng was ready to break through to the next stage. He could not help but feel anxious and worried, but it was already too late. The lake breeze lightly fluttered his Taoist robe. Chun Changsheng's eyes were closed. He was no longer in this world. His consciousness returned to the most primitive place, that tranquil and profound sea of consciousness. With a slight thought, his sea of consciousness naturally produced waves that set off unimaginably huge waves. These waves were as tall as a 10-story building, and their momentum was extremely astonishing. They constantly pierced towards the gloomy sky above the sea. However, the sky was too high. No matter how high the waves were, they could not reach it. When they reached the peak, they would fall back down helplessly, smashing countless fine white foam on the surface of the sea. If the waves were not separated from the seawater, they would not be able to soar into the sky. If it was in the past, it would not be difficult for him to send a wisp of his divine sense into the sky, but today he needed to send more of his divine sense there. Therefore, he willed it again, turning into countless sharp weapons, swords, sabers, and then sever thought. Above his sea of consciousness, a storm raged. Countless howling winds and torrential rain came from the horizon, transforming into countless seemingly real moves, slashing towards the surging waves. Orthodox Academy's True Sword, Mount Lee's Mountain Gate Sword, Three Songs of the Fisherman, Three Swords of One Shui, Snow Mountain Sect's Frozen Frost Sword, Star Caesar Academy's Army Vanquishing Sword, Heavenly Tao Academy's Sword of Hithering Light, South Stream Temple's Three Lanes of Plum Blossom. Countless sword techniques appeared in the storm and danced wildly on the surface of the sea. The 10-story tall waves were shaken by the slash and gradually separated from the surface of the sea. However, there was still a deep connection that could not be completely severed. An extremely resolute shout rang out from the surface of the sea. Then, a saber intent descended from the sky. Having blade technique, first form, origin. This was the most powerful saber technique in the world. Before this saber, everything would be cut in half. The huge wave finally broke off from the surface of the sea and floated up. When the huge waves left the surface of the sea, they turned into pure water, looking just like the lake outside the ethereal palace. Having lost its connection with the sea of consciousness, the seawater seemed to have lost all weight. It gently drifted towards the gloomy sky, drifting higher and higher, further and further away. Finally, it followed a passage that it had not truly passed through for a long time, but was actually strengthening every day, and arrived at the sea of stars in the deepest part of the sky. This sea water was the essence of his soul consciousness, the essence of his experience, and the most precious thing to him. When he arrived at the starry sea, his divine sense did not stop. It continued to move forward at a seemingly slow pace, but in reality, it was extremely fast. After a long time, he finally arrived at the edge of the starry sea. This place was extremely far away from the earth. It was already on the other side of the sea of stars. There was nothingness outside the sea of stars, but what about beyond the nothingness? Chun Chong Sheng looked into the incomparably distant distance and felt that there were still countless stars there. Back in the library of the Orthodox Academy, on that night when he ignited his fated star, he had this sort of feeling. It was like he was looking at the lights of 10,000 houses. Unfortunately, the other side was too far away. With the strength and density of his current divine sense, no matter what, he could not reach there. He could not explore the true edge of the world. He retracted his gaze and looked towards an inconspicuous corner at the edge of the sea of stars. There was an inconspicuous star there. It was very small, very red, and looked like an apple. This was his fated star. His divine sense slowly approached it. The sea water fell on the little red star. Not only did it not lower the temperature of the star and extinguish the flames, but it also made the red flames on the surface of the star even more violent. The golden wind and jade met and turned into countless molten magma, spraying countless starlight into the pitch-black space. Almost surpassing the limits of time and space, the incalculable amount of starlight from the extremely distant edge of the sea of stars returned to the earth and poured into his body. There was a loud bang. Chun Chong Sheng, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly sunk half a foot into the ground. That was because the ground within a radius of 3 zhang under his body had sunk. The lake wind howled and swirled around his body, causing his Taoist robe to flap. The wind poured into his sword sheath, causing it to hum, seeming extremely wild and excited. Dust flew everywhere, rising into the heavens. It was as if black smoke had dimmed the bright sun by quite a bit. Someone inadvertently looked towards the sky and saw that in the gloomy sky, in a position relative to the sun, there was a faint dot of light that seemed like a star in the night sky. The problem was it was still daytime. So how could one see a star? How could there be such a bright star in the world? That person shook his head, driving this absurd thought out of his mind, and once again looked towards the scene. At this time, only the Elder of Heavenly Secrets was not looking at the cross-legged Chun Chong Sheng, but at the sky. And only he could be sure that in the gloomy sky, a star had truly appeared. The sea of stars contained an inexplicable fate. Even he could not determine the position of that star, but he knew why that star had appeared. On this ordinary day at the end of summer, The midday sun was still blazing fiercely. Who would notice that fleeting star? Even if they noticed it, who would dare believe their own eyes? In a mountain field on the outskirts of the capital, the Pope stood in front of Archbishop Melchior's grave, gazing at the name of his old friend on the gravestone. His eyes were tinged with worry as he said, "Back then, we were worried that he would mature too quickly, but now it seems that this worry was reasonable." On the highest dew platform in the capital, the divine empress held her hands behind her back and gazed at a certain place in the sky. The sunlight was very dazzling, but she did not even blink. Ever since many years ago, when Emperor Taizong had driven her out of the imperial palace and demoted her to the 100 Herb Garden, she no longer feared looking directly at the sun. Today, she was also not looking at the sun. Behind her, Yu gazed at her back, somewhat uneasily thinking, just what did the Empress see that made her remain silent for so long? In the most majestic and imposing palace hall of Shualao City, the demon lord sat on a chair, silently listening to his most loyal subordinate report on the recent strange movements of the demon commander and the conflicts between the nobles and military advisor Blackrobe's faction. He was still the middle-aged scholar he had been in Mount Han, but his face was much paler, and the mountains and rivers he had seen were already in ruins. He somewhat wearily waved his hand for that subordinate to scram. Suddenly, he sensed something and raised his head to glance at the top of the palace. After a moment of silence, he stood up and walked to a green plant. This was a persimmon tree he had brought back from the stream in Mount Han. He gazed at the heavy persimmons on the treetop and frowned. It's actually going to ripen so quickly. Chapter 594. Taoist Ji and Yuren walked through the plains. They did not walk on the official road, did not take a boat to cross the Luo River. They only walked in the places with the least people, the places where the weeds were the thickest. Their Taoist robes were covered in bits of grass, and beneath their walking sticks was a crushed praying mantis. Because he was not good at walking, Yuren walked very slowly. Taoist Ji had to take care of his disciples' speed, so he naturally could not go too fast. Yet they had clearly been in the snowy plains to the north of Mount Han a few days ago. So why were they here, in the plains where they could see that mighty city? That city had no walls, but on a day like today, when the sky was as blue as if it had been washed, it could be seen from several dozen li away. This was because within the city was a high platform, and outside the city was a high hill, as well as countless buildings that towered into the clouds. Returning to this place after so many years, Taoist Ji's face showed no emotion. It was still calm and indifferent, perhaps numb. Yuren had no impression of the capital, nor did he have any feelings, but his face still revealed some curiosity and yearning. But in the next moment, those emotions on his face transformed into solemnity and unease. He gazed at a certain place in the blue sky for a very long time. The stifling wind of the plains ruffled the black hair on his forehead. He only had one eye that could see, so staring into the distance like this was very easy to make him feel sore. He rubbed his eyes and couldn't help but wonder if his eyes were playing tricks on him earlier. You didn't see wrong. That is your junior brother's fated star. At some point, Taoist Ji had also gazed up at the sky. An extremely faint smile finally appeared on his usually calm and emotionless face. Although the smile was faint, it concealed a very strong emotion. Too many years had passed, and he had almost forgotten which direction the wind was blowing in the Palace of Great Clarity when Emperor Taizong said those words to him before returning to the Sea of Stars. Hearing Taoist Ji's words, Yuren became even more uneasy. There's no need to worry. This is a good thing. After saying this, Taoist Ji continued forward. Yuren looked at his back and opened his mouth to shout something, but no sound came out. He gestured with his hands, but he could not be seen. He could only shake his head and follow. The wind rustled the weeds on the plains, parting them to form a path. Master and disciple walked along the path in the wild grass. One was happy, the other worried. At the end of this path, the capital loomed. At the peak of Mount Han, by the lakeside of the Heaven Lake, many people had already guessed what Chun Changshan was doing, or what he was experiencing. Countless shocked discussions sounded, turning into a buzzing sound like that of a swarm of wild bees. Then it disappeared in an extremely short period of time, becoming absolutely still. Looking at Chun Changsheng, who was sitting cross-legged, everyone's faces were filled with shock. Was it star condensation? During the grand examination, Chun Changsheng had broken through to the ethereal opening on the spot. Could it be that today he would also break into star condensation? This genius of the orthodoxy, who had already created far too many miracles, was he going to shock the entire continent once more? Could he succeed? Choosing to break through at such a time was shocking enough in itself. But the real key to this matter was still whether he could do it in the end. If he could, it would be a miracle. If not, it would be a joke. Moreover, just being able to do it wasn't enough. What was star condensation? If those who did not understand cultivation had read a few related books, they would perhaps believe that star condensation was a higher level of purification, that one could borrow the radiance of the myriad stars bestowed by the sea of stars in the instant of breaking into star condensation and directly raise the strength of the body to an unimaginable level. This view was not completely without reason. Even if human star condensation experts did not condense a star domain, they would still be able to directly battle against demon experts in terms of physical strength and strength. But the true crux of star condensation lay in the 4 words condensing a star domain. Cultivators borrowed the frenzied radiance of the stars to directly open up the many meridians and circulations in their body, doing their utmost to light up more than 300 chi openings. From then on, they would possess an unending stream of true essence that, under normal circumstances, could be called inexhaustible. The radiance of the stars would manifest, forming a world of its own. Only at this moment could one be said to have entered the ranks of true experts. The problem was how to distribute the amount of star radiance, how to choose the order and number of chi openings to light up. This was an extremely complicated problem. Even disciples of great sects with extremely deep resources had to undergo a long period of preparation with the help of their teachers before breaking into star condensation. If they were even the slightest bit careless, there was a high chance that they would fail in breaking into star condensation. There was even a chance that the star radiance would reverse, causing the cultivator to be heavily injured and their cultivation to greatly decrease. They might even lose all hope of breaking into star condensation for the rest of their lives. Among the numerous thresholds of cultivation, although star condensation was not as dangerous as ethereal opening, it could not be taken lightly. It especially required the person breaking through to have sufficient experience and comprehension. No matter how much of a genius Chun Changsheng was, he was still not even 17 years old. Moreover, he did not possess the bloodline of the true dragon like Qiushan Jun ever since he was a child. He had floated in the sea of the Tao and had cultivated for less than 2 years. How could he have had enough time to comprehend, and experience? Even if he forcefully broke through and was fortunate enough not to experience a reversal of star radiance, if the order in which he opened the chi openings was wrong, or if the number of chi openings was too much, there was a chance that the star domain he condensed would be flawed. Let alone perfect, it might even be very ordinary. To ordinary cultivators, as long as they could condense a star domain, it was an extremely extraordinary feat in the present world. It was very difficult for even the star domains of star condensation experts to be called perfect, but he was Chun Changsheng, the future pope. The common people naturally had different requirements for him. Just like what Suli had mocked in the wilderness, could such a star domain even be worthy of being called a star domain? The crowd waited for the result with different moods, so the expressions on their faces were naturally different. Go Hanchi's expression was very calm, Guan Feibai's very solemn, and Liang Bana's expression was rather desolate. This was because they had a deep understanding of Chun Changsheng. Since he had chosen this moment to break into star condensation, he had assuredly made ample preparations and was confident in himself. Zhixio's expression was very indifferent, but his pupils slightly constricted. Tang 36's face was rather pale, his hands tightly clenched. They understood Chun Changsheng even better and also believed that Chun Changsheng could successfully break into star condensation. However, they were still somewhat nervous, afraid that some accident might occur. No one knew that the person who was the most nervous was Su Yurong. She sat behind the curtain, her face expressionless, but her body was slightly leaning forward, as if she could stand up at any moment. A star began to shine in the daytime. Star radiance descended from the heavens and poured into Chun Changxing's body. The hard stone platform sank half a foot because of this, and the scenery of the lake and mountain fell silent. Chun Changxing's eyes were still closed, but he had already woken up and returned to the real world. He performed meditative introspection and examined the situation in his body. He confirmed that his ethereal palace was already wide open, that all his true essence had begun to ignite, and that the star radiance pouring into his body was about to go out of control. He knew that it was time to make a choice. He naturally wanted to condense a perfect star domain, and he also had the confidence that he could do this. Star condensation required a very long time to comprehend, sense, experience, and prepare. Although he had only cultivated for 2 years, he had already spent a great deal of time, because his cultivation had always been different from others. He had begun meditative introspection before he had even succeeded in purification. When he had been drawing in starlight for purification, he had actually been at ethereal opening. He had always been using methods that surpassed his true cultivation level to cultivate. Last year in the Mausoleum of Books, when he was at ethereal opening, he had already begun star condensation ahead of time. In the wilderness, when Suli had passed on the intellectual sword to him, he had stood by the lake and gazed at the starry sky, pondering how to break the star domain of a star condensation expert. At the same time, he was also pondering how to project the sea of stars into his own body, how to light up his chi openings, and what kind of star domain to condense. His starry sky had already been there for a long time. All he needed to do was wait for it to light up. Because I was stuck on a specific method of telling a plot, I pondered it for a very long time, but in the end, I still could not come to a conclusion. I decided to move it to the next chapter. I thought for another night and stopped here. Chapter 595. On the stone platform by the lake, there was no longer any wind nor any sound. Suddenly, there was a muffled sound of thunder. This sound of thunder was a bit strange because it didn't come from the real world, but from people's sea of consciousness. This sound of thunder came from Chun Changsheng's body. It didn't come from the vibrations of the air, but from the explosion of true essence and the burning of chi openings. Somewhere on Chun Changsheng's chest suddenly became bright. The light came from his body, penetrated through his tattered Taoist robe, and reflected into everyone's eyes. That chi opening was lit up by him. Soon after, more and more muffled sounds of thunder sounded. These sounds of thunder seemed to come from the sky, but actually came from his body. More and more spots of light appeared in the depths of his Taoist robe. The order in which these chi openings were lit up seemed to have no pattern. These chi openings also didn't seem to have any connection with each other. If these chi openings were to be connected with a line, it would only be a very sloppy picture. As time went by, the atmosphere became more and more tense. The gazes that fell on Chun Changsheng became more and more concerned. He had already lit up many chi openings in his body. His Taoist robe became brighter and brighter, as if it was a glass lamp, incomparably bright from the inside out. At a certain moment, the sound of thunder finally stopped. He finally stopped the process of the star radiance lighting up the chi openings. No one could clearly see how many chi openings he had lit up. Did he light up dozens of chi openings like ordinary cultivators, or did he light up more than 100 or even 200 chi openings like those cultivators with extraordinary talent? The quiet world around him began to move. The breeze on the surface of the lake lightly brushed against his tattered Taoist robe. The light in the robe gradually faded, revealing star-like spots of light. Those spots of light seemed messy, but in reality they had their own pattern. They were the countless stars in the night sky, forming a complete star chart. This was the star domain. Chun Changsheng opened his eyes. His eyes were still as clean as before, but compared to before, there were some subtle changes. The depths of his clear eyes faintly emitted the light of stars, as if they were jade that had been washed by water for countless years. His presence had also undergone a great change, becoming purer and stronger. The lake breeze blew gently, causing his Taoist robe to flutter. He stood up, stardust drifting out from his sleeves and slowly dancing in the air. The stardust gradually disappeared, and so did the countless stars on his Taoist robe. However, an invisible barrier remained. He was still standing in the same place, but he was no longer in this world. There was a deathly silence. Chen Changsheng had successfully entered star condensation. Furthermore, the star domain he had condensed looked so complete that it even gave off a feeling of perfection. Previously, Guo Hanqi had revealed his star condensation cultivation in front of Scholarly Manor's Zhong Hui, causing everyone to feel incomparable shock and admiration. But what about now? He broke Qiushan Jun's record, becoming the youngest star condensation cultivator in history. The silence was finally broken by excited discussions and shocked sighs. The place became extremely lively. Seeing Chan Chong Sheng open his eyes, Tang 36's tightly clenched fists finally relaxed. Then, he looked at Guan Fei Bai and raised his eyebrows with an indescribable pride. Guan Fei Bai did not look at him, nor did he look at Chen Changsheng. Instead, he looked at Guan Bai, who was slowly rising to his feet, his face filled with respect. Many people were also looking at Guan Bai with admiration and reverence. Only now did some people completely understand why Chen Changsheng had asked Guan Bai to wait a while for him, and Guan Bai had actually just quietly waited. This sort of demeanor was truly worthy of praise. There were also some people gazing at the high platform, at that beautiful figure behind the curtain. These people were thinking that since Chen Changsheng had succeeded in breaking into star condensation, the Holy Maiden's mood would presumably be extremely poor. Chen Changsheng sensed that star in the distant sky, sensed the power of its radiance, sensed the endless flow of true essence through his meridians, and was deeply moved. Because he had spent so much time comprehending and preparing, he was very confident that he could condense a perfect star domain. But a star domain was one thing. To him, the most important aspect of succeeding in star condensation was that it could partially resolve the problem of his true essence being limited due to the blockage of his meridians. It was even possible for him to borrow this power to directly break open those blockages in his meridians. He currently felt his body brimming with boundless strength. He was confident that if the Demon Lord came again and he opened the yellow paper umbrella, he would be able to block at least 2 of his attacks. This also meant that even if he faced the world's most powerful expert, he would still be able to protect his life for at least an instant. Although an instant could not cover 10,000 li, nor could it cover 100 years, it was enough for him to use all the methods he had hidden, allowing him to find a way to break through space and enter the Garden of Zhou. And as long as he entered the Garden of Zhou, he was confident that neither the Demon Lord nor any other terrifying expert would be able to kill him in a short amount of time. The result of his calculations was very perfect, which made him feel very at ease. The flow of true essence in his body and this rich feeling of strength strengthened this feeling. Breaking into star condensation strengthened his perception, making the scenery of the lakes and mountains in his eyes even more vivid. In short, he had never felt that the world was so beautiful. A few nights ago, after that long conversation with Su Yorong, he had resolved to break into star condensation during the Boiling Stone Summit. What he pursued was precisely this feeling of ease. Thus, even though he knew that his cultivation was far inferior to his opponent's, he still accepted his opponent's challenge. He wanted to borrow this pressure to break through that most crucial wall. Of course, he needed to thank his opponent for giving him this opportunity and for giving him so much time in such a carefree manner. Chen Changsheng sincerely bowed to Guan Bai and said with a sincere expression, "Many thanks, senior." Guan Bai did not avoid it. He had given Chen Changsheng 1 year precisely because he wanted to see if he could successfully break into star condensation in this 1 year. As expected, you did not disappoint me, did not disappoint the world. He looked at Chen Changsheng and said, "But in today's sword battle, I still have to win. In this battle, Guanbai was fighting in place of Zhuang Huanyu, who had committed suicide by the cold well of the Heavenly Tao Academy. He had the dignity of an expert on the path of the sword, the bearing of the young leader of the Heavenly Tao Academy. He could give Chen Changsheng enough time to break into star condensation, could even protect him, but he would not let Chen Changsheng leave with the attitude of a victor. By successfully breaking into star condensation, Chen Changsheng had accomplished his most important goal in coming to Mount Han. Whether it was the Pope's or Su Li's expectations, they had already been completely realized by him. He had no interest in the Heaven Stone, even if he knew that the little black stone on the plate probably had some secret relationship with Wang Jitze. He did not care about the outcome of this battle and was completely capable of leaving, but out of gratitude and respect for Guanbai, he had to seriously finish this battle, giving his first battle after breaking into star condensation to his opponent. He raised the stainless sword in his hand and pointed it at Guanbai, calm and respectful. Guanbai raised the sword in his left hand and very casually chopped down from above. Above was the heavens, below was the earth. Chopping down from above meant descending from the heavens. But his sword was not a waterfall descending from the heavens, but more like a flowing cloud high in the sky, carrying with it an even more profound meaning. As he gazed at this seemingly simple sword, Go Hanchi's expression instantly turned extremely solemn. The hair at Jushio's temples suddenly floated up like steel wires. The beautiful figure behind the curtain seemed to faintly move forward. They could see the terrifying aspect of Guanbai's sword. While Chen Changsheng was breaking into star condensation, Guanbai was not idle. He also sat cross-legged on the ground, accumulating and comprehending. Guanbai was comprehending the world around him, the stones in the lake behind him, as well as the changes in the world and the movements of the stones as Chen Changsheng broke into star condensation. From this, he sought out a pattern and then refined it. This sword of his was no longer strength, but a pattern. The pattern of the world was the Heavenly Tao. Although this sword of his was still far from being the true Heavenly Tao, it was still an incomparably real sword of the Heavenly Tao. As the head of the 6 Ivies for the past 100 years, the Heavenly Tao Academy naturally had its extraordinary aspects. Its most extraordinary aspect was its Taoist technique that could sense the Heavenly Tao. As the previous principal of the Heavenly Tao Academy, Mao Qiyu was naturally incomparably familiar with this sword of Guanbai's. His face revealed sorrow, reminiscence, gratification, and many other emotions. In his view, Chen Changsheng had no way of receiving this sword, even though he had already broken into star condensation and his cultivation had skyrocketed. The Heavenly Tao sword was the strongest sword of the Heavenly Tao Academy. This sword required the wielder to raise their spirit and spirit to the most perfect level, then become one with the world around them. Only then could it be used. It was impossible for cultivators of the same level to block this sword. Even the wielder himself, once he began to use this sword style, would find it impossible to stop. Because the Heavenly Tao could not be disobeyed, the Heavenly Tao could not be defied. If it were a normal cultivator who had just broken into star condensation and whose cultivation was still unstable, they would perhaps have thoughts of giving up before Guanbai's Heavenly Tao sword. But Chen Changsheng would not. Although when he saw this sword descend from the sky, he already knew that he did not have much confidence in defeating Guanbai, he still wanted to try and receive this sword. It was precisely because this sword represented the Heavenly Tao. In the last few years, he had been fighting against fate. What he wanted to fight against was the Heavenly Tao. He had to win, or, at the very least, he could not lose that heart that dared to challenge the Heavenly Tao. So not only did he not retreat, he took a step forward to welcome the Heavenly Tao sword. As a step fell, thunder began to roar once more, as if countless small storms were taking form in his body and then beginning to furiously revolve. Boom! The star radiance in 10-some chi openings began to explode, then link together into a line. A blocked meridian was thus opened. Everyone in the surroundings was able to clearly sense that the aura he emanated was actually much stronger than before. But this was still not enough to help him defeat the heavenly Tao. He very calmly took another step forward. As a step fell, the wind stirred and his Taoist robe madly danced. Although it was tattered, it was like a banner of war. Another blocked meridian was opened, and his chi once more grew stronger. Soon after, his third step fell, and yet there was no thunder, no wind. There was no sound at all, only silence. His brow creased, somewhat pained, somewhat astonished. He turned his head to a certain place, seeming to be in great difficulty, as if this simple movement had consumed all his strength. That place was the high platform, isolated by a curtain. He gazed at the beautiful figure behind the curtain, his expression slightly perplexed, seeming very helpless. Just what had happened? He stood on the stone platform, his face pale, seemingly unable to make any movement. And at this moment, the heavenly Tao sword had already slashed down.